All right, welcome. We'll go ahead and get started this evening. Is there a motion to accept or modify the agenda?
I move to modify the agenda to remove the resignation. I'm sorry.
We're doing the main agenda now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I move that the agenda be accepted as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to modify the consent agenda to remove the resignation of Thomas Schertz.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Moving on to the action agenda this evening.
Madam Chair, could you still go ahead and approve the rest of the consent agenda?
Oh,
So
sorry.
you remove that name?
Okay, I gotcha. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with that modification?
I'll move to accept the consent agenda with the removal.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Now we're gonna move on to the action. All right, so the first item this evening is gonna be the certified substitute assistant principal rate, and that's Mr. Goodwin. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this evening? Okay, Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you. I'd like to speak on this. if I could. Good evening. It's so good to see each one of you tonight. The Warren County Public Schools has a board-approved established rate for certified substitute principal, and that rate is listed here at $350 per day. However, we do not have an existing certified substitute assistant principal rate. I stand before you tonight to ask you to please consider, to help us meet our needs of schools during an interim period of time where an assistant principal may perhaps be needed, that we establish a certified substitute assistant principal rate set at $275 per day. So I present that to you tonight. I'm glad to answer questions and ask for your consideration.
Any questions for Mr. Goodwin on this?
Can you share with us how you came up with that rate?
Well, the certified substitute assistant, principal rate is $350 per day. We looked at a number of scales for our administrators to consider the beginning, a person with experience that would be retired, and then we set the rate based on those years.
We kind of really looked at what the difference was between admin 1, 2, 3, and 5. And there was usually a difference between $30 to $60 in between those rates. And so we just looked back and set that at $275 to just kind of be consistent with what we were seeing and the difference between rates for those that are hired in those positions when you look at the APs.
The certified principal rate is listed on the miscellaneous daily rates and hourly rates. We have never had, to my knowledge, an assistant principal rate listed there. So
And if an assistant principal was going to be out for like a week, then you would get a sub. But what if it was just a day here and a day there? Would you get a sub for that? What are the parameters there?
Typically not, sir. Sorry.
no, you go ahead.
Typically, we would not do something for a day here, a day there. It's typically for your long-term situations, if it's going to be a week, or if you may have, we've had situations where we've had both administrators out, the principal and the assistant principal. So, we would need to have some coverage there. Maybe in a situation like that, we may do a day if we see that we have multiple administrators out for support. Typically, when we have administrators out, principals are good at letting us know, and then my staff will circulate through that building throughout the day. So I may go over there for an hour to an hour and a half to 2 hours, maybe in the morning or in the afternoon. Mr. Goodwin will do the same, Mr. Smith, Ms. Bragg, and we all just rotate over through there to help support that building on that day. So, but typically, the answer would be no, not on just a single day.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions for Mr. Goodwin? Is there a motion?
I move that the board approve the establishment of a certified substitute assistant principal rate set at $275 per day.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Great. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you.
Approval to purchase Mastery Connect. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this evening? Okay, Ms. Bragg.
Good evening. Before you this evening is a request to purchase Mastery Connect, our assessment-based software platform. Mastery Connect is a competency-based learning system that helps teachers administer our quarterly benchmarks, identify students' levels of performance, and help to target students for intervention and inform their instruction. Mastery Connect is, again, our primary platform for delivering the benchmark assessments that are required by the county as part of our CIP membership, and also gives us the information as we move through the year on how our students are progressing through the standards and their understanding. So the contract is for 1 year, and it's in the amount of $28,465.
Any questions for Ms. Bragg on this?
Is this like, do the teachers input the data and it does the data, or does it actually allow for is it the platform where the students actually take the test? You upload the,
It is the platform where the students actually take the test, and then it does have a data analysis piece that it provides to the teachers based on the results of those tests. So it's, I think if I understand your question right, it's sort of both. It's both the testing software and the data analytics from those tests.
and are the benchmarks, are those created through the CIP?
Those are CIP benchmarks, and we have the,
Uploaded here?
yep, yes.
CIP,
Yes.
as the group that creates those benchmarks, we have to have a platform to administer them. And so it used to be
Perform.
IA, then it went to
Performance
Performance Matters. We were having
Had
issues
several.
with Performance Matters, and so we went to Mastery Connect. So, you know, as some of those software programs go out of date, we have to find a new one. This one, I think we've used for the last 2 years or 3 years.
This would be we're currently using it now. This would be our second year, I believe.
Yes.
And is the format the same as what they see on the SOLs or similar?
It's
or is
similar. It's similar. It's not exact, but it's similar. And it does offer like the different kinds of question types, like the technology enhanced item question types and straight multiple choice, and so it supports those those sort of different question types that the students encounter on the SOL. Yes.
Is there a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move that the Warren County Public Schools purchase Master Connect as an assessment platform for the 2022-2023 school year at a cost of $28,465.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you, Ms. Bragg. Thank you. Next up is going to be the Right Turn Program and the instructor rate. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on that this evening? Looks like Mr. Smith is going to tell us about it.
Thank you. Good evening. The Right Turn program is designed to educate students and their parents on the dangers of drugs and alcohol. In addition, the program explores the importance of goal setting and decision making. Students who are assigned this program have received suspension for drugs or alcohol school board policy violations. Warren County Public Schools has contracted this service with a third-party vendor in the past. Currently, the vendor is unable to provide the service. It's being requested for us to be able to do this with some in-house personnel instruction for this particular program, and that the previously paid rate per module of $150 be approved for inclusion on the miscellaneous salary scale. The complete program consists of 6 modules that are taught once per week, beginning at 6 p.m. at Diversified Minds. It's normally a 2-hour program with prep prior to those type of things. It's a module program. It's in lieu of any additional suspensions based upon a violation of a drug and alcohol policy. It's an educational program. At one time, it was 8 modules. Now it's down to 6. And we've had issues with our previous group of instructors of being able to instruct during this time. So we would like to take that and go in-house so that we can continue to provide that educational piece.
Does this go for just one 6-week period for all students involved, or does it keep starting over?
It goes throughout the year. It will run in like rotation. We could start like let's say at the beginning of January, for example, and we would run a set of students through. Normally, there's not a lot of students that run through this program as a large group. Normally, it's roughly 8 to 10 or so students with their parents, because you want this to be able to be a format of which there could be dialogue and conversation. And so we would run through each week one module per week. Let's say it's a Tuesday. Each Tuesday we would run through until we get that cohort group through, and then they would receive their completion certificate, and then that's put as part of their discipline file, just so that they've completed the program. And once again, the program itself, it has it does a lot of things. It identifies, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, how it affects you, those type of things. Talks about decision making, and there you have to have a parent there with you. So you're having dialogue and so forth with a parent or a guardian while you're going through this program. So once that cohort's through, then they start another cohort, and then we just run it through the regular school year.
How many instructors would do?
Just one. It's more sort of kind of like this format and those type of things where so it wouldn't be a lot, so it would just need to be just one.
How does this program compare to the program, alcohol and drug use that is taught in health classes?
Well, I think it perhaps could mirror some of that. I think it goes into like a deeper level than you're able to do in health class, just because of the interest of time, where one class itself may be more specific toward like drug use or the effects of drugs and those type of things on the body. You could spend that particular time. So it would go more in depth. And also the one thing that perhaps the health class may not be able to provide is that the parent or the guardian would be able to be there to have that dialogue.
And that's a requirement that the parent be there.
Yes, it is a requirement that if there's a violation of drugs or alcohol, that the student, along with a guardian or a parent, attends the class. And it is required that either one, you only need one parent. Both parents can come, or you could rotate off perhaps, where maybe one parent comes with the student this week and next week. But it's just important to also involve the parents in the process.
How do you measure the success of that program?
I don't think that afterwards, I don't think there is a follow-up assessment, or I think one reason you could judge that is the effects of the repeat of the same behavior. If the behavior itself continues to repeat, then obviously that particular program may not be reaching the child's needs or the student's needs. To my knowledge, there's not an assessment tool that comes afterwards to follow that up. I would answer that question by saying, where are we at the repeat offense of that behavior?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to know what the repeat rate is, so we can really assess the success rate of the program. Who specifically has been teaching and will be teaching? Like, what are their qualifications to teach this? Are they a substance abuse counselor? Is it just a teacher?
It's been a counselor of sorts. It's not necessarily a substance abuse counselor. It could be someone who's been trained in a level of counseling I believe that prior to this, I believe maybe part of the Warren Coalition had a role in this in providing those type of counselors. Our role that we would be looking for is that someone would have a background in counseling. There's
Really,
not
this is
a,
just kind of to support, I mean, we still want to continue with our partnership, but right now, we have heard that there has been situations where parents and students have shown up and nobody was here to deliver the course. So for us, if we're putting this as a requirement for these students to attend and the parents to attend, to go through this program, we need to make sure that we have somebody here to go through the program with them as part of the disciplinary action that we were taking against them. And so that's why it came up with the idea of, is there is an individual within our division that, yes, they can do this, that looking at that counseling background to where they would be able to come out here and we would still be able to rotate those families through. Because it's not fair to the families if they show up and there's nobody here for the program. And so, but eventually, I mean, if our partners get to where they can continue that, then of course, we will definitely let them continue that as part of it, unless this works out good for us and the employee is fine with it.
So do we own the program, or is it the program owned by, I guess, the Warren Coalition? And that's,
That, I can't answer that question.
yeah, I would have to, what we have
do we have to
used,
pay for the program? Are we paying for the program
I
additionally?
would,
We would have to do
I'd
that.
have to, Dr. Funk, I'd have to find that out for you.
And then the person who would do this, they would go through, I guess, some training, so, you know, I mean, obviously they have some background experience, but is there a right turn training program that they would attend or go through, or?
I'm not aware that there is or isn't, but they would obviously have their training, hopefully in the counseling area. The modules themselves are sort of already set. It itself kind of takes you through, and this person is obviously to have the background is, right, you're facilitating, so it's a program, and a lot of it is to get that dialogue, is to get the parent and the student to have some of that dialogue, because sometimes those are some of the factors of which are not there. So I'm not aware in this program of a particular certification that's required to do this program. And we have used this program for some years now. And I can find out for you the training. I just do not know the answer to that question at this time.
Do the parents have to reimburse, or is there a fee to participate in this?
There's not a fee to
It's free.
participate. There's not a fee to participate.
Okay.
And we normally have that here in this building.
And then is there, do you know, is this module, is it targeted towards alcohol, marijuana, or opiates? Because obviously the treatment aspects for each of those would be very different.
I think that it's going to touch on a variety of those. I have not attended the program nor instructed the program, so I would have to defer to the syllabus or so forth of that program. I know that they talk about different levels of drugs, the effects and so forth on the body. I don't know specifically which ones they may cover more so than others, but I know they have that dialogue of the effects. And I'm not sure so much, are they getting into a particular treatment or a particular, it's almost an awareness, which then would generate some questions of then when that person would have that particular training that would make it impactful.
Can we involve the sheriff's department in this? I know we did that when I used to teach, we had the sheriff come in and give a little presentation on drug use. Is that something that could be sandwiched with this program?
That's something we can look at in the future and evaluate and see if that is a need that we have. But I'm not opposed to that if that's something that would work out. So we would just need to evaluate that. We will be evaluating some things, and so. So we can definitely look into it.
Is there any grading or pass-fail for the child in this, or is it they just have to sit through it?
They
It's
have-
not-
Yes. They have to attend all 6 sessions with a parent. So it's, at the very end, there's not necessarily an assessment of some sort. It, once again, goes through presenting the information and having that dialogue with the parent. It's more of a completion than it is an assessment.
Because we offer drug tests, we offer those parents maybe some free drug tests to take home to use with their children, if they so choose to do so.
I'm not sure that we offer that during the particular class itself, but perhaps the resources that they would gain through this and the connections with the instructor could be able to help for something such as that to provide. But I'm not aware that this program provides those particular things.
And if the board would like, I can definitely get more information on the program for you. I just, Mr. Smith and I aren't equipped to get into the details of it because we haven't been into the details of the program. It has been established here before, but I can definitely gather any information that you want concerning the program and get that to you if the board so chooses.
It sounds like you said like anywhere from 8 to 10 students potentially every 6 weeks. That's a
It's a lot of kids.
that's a group of kids, yeah. Definitely could
And they,
hopefully
you know,
help.
Perhaps once I work with discipline today with some students who were assigned the right turn. So program as part of their return to school. Now, they do not have to complete this program prior in order to return to school since it's a 6 weeks program. They are able to return to school and then we assign them through our special services office with the time of which they would start their cohort to go through the program. Sometimes it could be less than that. Most of the time it's around that. Sometimes we may start the cohort, the first week of the cohort, someone that following week needs to start. So we'll put them over in perhaps module 2 because module 1 may be more of an introduction type thing. And there's some other resources that the program in the past has used to help those individuals to catch up. And then we just take them through the program and then somehow through the program get the information from module 1. Because sometimes we'd have to have them wait if it's only a weekend, it's 5 weeks, 6 weeks later before they're able to start. So it I kind of want to, get to them while we're saying, hey, your behavior needs to change. These are the things that's occurring. These are the things that are affecting your body. This is what's going on. I'd rather not wait 6 weeks.
Is it possible for us to do like we did with the SEL and look at it online on our own as a board?
I can look and see if it's an online or if it's how we have it. I mean, honestly, I will just need to get more information on it.
Is there a way for us as a board to approve this on a temporary basis so that no student is left out from doing this, but also at the same time collect that information and review it and
I'd feel better not
There.
stopping it tonight.
Right, I don't wanna-
Because I like that the parents are involved and it sounds like it's a good opportunity.
Yeah,
for
no, I don't want
communication.
to stop it, but is there any way to revisit this as we collect more information? Because my
I think
concern is that, I love the fact that the parents are required to attend. Love that. Love the fact that we're offering it to the kids. My biggest concern is what exactly is in the module, because if we have students who are vaping and they're going to this class, great, I'm sure it's probably fine. But if we have kids who are being caught with things like opiates and benzos and things like that, I wouldn't want their parents to think that this 6-week course somehow takes place of a true substance abuse treatment program for those very serious addictions. Because I have seen how that goes through with opiate addicts and just requiring them to attend some report system like ASAP, which is geared towards alcohol, and then the family thinks, oh, they're getting their treatment, and it's not in fact actually treatment that addresses the severity of those types of addictions.
I think this program, if it's like others I've been involved in, is kind of the generalization of it, the refusal skills, making good decisions, consequences of poor decisions, things like that. Gets people thinking. A lot of times, kids and adults don't think of the consequences of their actions sometimes, and it just kind of brings that to a forefront.
Well, I'm just thinking of the success rate, like we can look into the success rate, how many reoffend after this. If this is working, great, let's absolutely continue it. If it's not working, let's explore what we can add on to it or tweak it or whatnot, just so we can get some extra information. But no, I wouldn't want to stop it
Oh, no.
now.
Maybe we
Not
could
at all.
discuss it again at the January work session, but just approve it as is
Yeah.
for now and
Get
then just
more, yeah.
follow up.
I think
Like-
that
We
like-
have,
sounds
we
good.
have
2
programs,
months.
we have the program going on right now. And this is just something that Mr. Smith and I needed to present to the board to make sure that we could, make sure we could compensate our staff member that is doing this program with these families and students. And I'll be more than happy to get any access I can or to the program and get it to you and let you review it. This is basically just to make sure that we can pay our staff member that is providing the program for some students right now.
I just think none of us really even knew that this program was in operation, so we could just talk about it maybe at our January work session. But is there a motion, with that being said, is there a motion for this evening?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll make that motion. I move that the Warren County School Board approves adding $150 per module instructor's fee for the Right Turn program, and that this payment be added to the miscellaneous salary scales.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Great, thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay.
Before we go to the next one, while I have it on my mind, a program like this for student discipline might be something to look at where we get the parent and a student that has discipline issues in school in the evening. A similar program might be beneficial, just what I was thinking about.
Next up is the acceptance of VTSS grant award. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on that? Ms. Bragg.
Hello. At the work session in October, I had given the board a presentation during the work session about our work with VTSS, that stands for the Virginia Tiered Systems of Support. We have since received the grant funding in the amount of $24,000 for the 22-23 school year. This money would be used to purchase items and things related to the initiatives that we're undertaking with VTSS, which includes academic achievement, attendance, positive behavior, and family community engagement. If there's any questions about VTSS from the presentation or about the grant, I'm happy to take those.
Is there a motion?
I move that the Warren County Public Schools accept the VTSS Grant Award for the 2022-2023 year in the amount of $24,000 and request an increase in appropriations in the instructional category from the Board of Supervisors.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Great, thank you, Ms. Bragg. Okay, moving on to our work session items, and up first is the VSBA Delegate Assembly update. Ms. Salins.
So as you all know, I attended the VSBA Delegate Assembly last week. And the way in which they vote on these legislation stance positions, these are how the VSBA will be lobbying on behalf of the school boards in Virginia. The process in which they come up with the changes to the legislative position, the school boards will submit them in early spring. It goes to a policy committee who then decides which ones will move forward to being voted on at the delegate assembly, which just took place. There were a total of 12 position update changes that were up for a vote. 11 of those 12 were proposed by Fairfax County. These legislative positions are important because, especially in the current situation where Virginia has these tax surpluses, a lot of these positions go towards getting the most support for your own personal county. And it was very obvious during the delegate assembly that there is a very wide difference between counties like Fairfax with a over $3 billion school budget versus counties like ours or even smaller counties than ours. There were certain positions that were geared definitely more towards the culture and climate of city living versus more rural county living. The way that these are typically voted on is in a block, so it's like a consent agenda where there's no discussion, it's just voted yes or no, so you have to request in advance to have certain items pulled, which I spoke to each of you individually and compiled a list of possible concerns that we had. Some of them were just some basic questions, clarifications, and then some were true objections. Now, their meeting goes a little differently than our meetings, where in our meetings it's very collaborative and we hear the information that's presented and then we can tweak it before we vote on it. With the VSBA, if you want to suggest any change at all, you have to have a 2/3 majority before you're even allowed to have the amendment made to then be voted on whether pass or fail. Of the 133 school districts, only 90 were present at this meeting. So I got the feeling, and this is just my feeling, that it felt like some of the more rural counties may be feeling a little neglected and have opted to not take part. So most of the items that had to do with rural counties objecting, there was only about a 25% no vote. So I was not able to get a 2/3 majority on any of these to even suggest the amendment. The first one that we had discussed, which I think you have the printout for, is the legislative position number 4, which is position 6.8, which is the school bus purchases. And what was decided at the delegate assembly is that the focus for fund matching is going to be focused on electric buses, which obviously Warren County, we cannot use electric buses. We had other counties that opposed this as well, and some of the points that were brought up were, for instance, that an electric bus costs about $400,000 versus a diesel bus, which is about $100,000. You have to add the additional training for the staff, for the bus drivers. You have to get a high voltage mechanic, which those are in short supply and high demand, and they demand a large salary. So my suggestion for us is that we adopt our own local position on this, which I have drafted one in front of you, which says Warren County supports legislation that provides fair and equitable state assistance for bus purchases. We recognize that some divisions can't have or don't want to make the switch to electric or propane buses. We believe that each local school division can best assess the needs of their locality and respect the will of each local school board to determine which buses will best serve their area. We do not support legislation that gives preference for tax dollars based on the type of bus being purchased. Warren County advocates fair and equal distribution of tax dollars towards general bus purchases. Each division should have the power to decide which type of bus best fits their needs. So if that is something that you guys want to go forward with, we would have to set it for an official vote at the next meeting. And then we would submit this to the VSBA so they remove our names from all of their lobbying towards our state representatives. And then we would need to submit this to our state representatives.
What is
are
the due date
your
to the
thoughts?
VSBA?
They hadn't given me one.
So I meant to
That
ask you
was
the other
kind
day.
of part of that whole email. I had asked about that in the delegate Q&A, and they quickly ended the meeting half an hour early, and then, yeah, so. Are there any thoughts on it? Are we pretty much all on the same
I mean,
page
I
with
agree
this
with
one?
you on the buses, to spend $400,000 on one bus for our county. I mean,
Yeah,
that
for us
doesn't
to
make
miss
any
out on
sense.
funding.
It's not only the bus, it's the charging station.
All of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, right now, if a bus ran out of fuel, a mechanic will take some fuel out there and you got the bus back in action. How do you do it? How do you charge it?
Yeah.
No.
No, I agree with you on this
Yeah,
one.
it's,
The next one that I had suggested a local position on is legislative position number 5, which is 8.1, school facility construction funds and financing. So they would like to put a emphasis on having more state matching funds for energy efficiency, which I 100% agree with. That is great. However, what I was hoping that what I requested that they would add to that is safety upgrades as well. I would like to see more state matching funds available for upgrades such as the bulletproof glass film or stronger doors, things that really protect the important things inside of our schools. Again, energy efficiency is great, and if we're replacing an HVAC unit, obviously let's get the matching funds and go energy efficient. But let's also not exclude true needed safety upgrades. So the local position that I was suggesting was to add to their already written policy, including specific incentives for safety upgrades to better protect students and staff, as well as incentives for energy efficient construction and renovation to reduce the lifetime operating costs of the school facilities. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
So, I agree with that as well.
Yeah, I don't think you can argue with safety.
yeah.
The next one was legislative position number 7, which is 10.4, safe school environment. And this one, especially now that we just voted on what we just voted on, I'm rethinking and on the fence with, but would love to hear more input. What they're asking for is more state funding to go towards substance abuse and mental health services inside of the schools. We were not the only ones who had questions on this. Actually, someone had requested that this be tabled until more details could be given because while Fairfax had submitted the request for changes, she was not clear on exactly what they were asking for. Unfortunately, that lost the vote, so it did go forward with the vote. The concern was that mental health services inside the schools, even if we have state matching, we are still going to have to locally match as well. My concern, part of my, what I had addressed was our schools designed or equipped to be healthcare facilities and properly deal with issues as serious as mental health and substance abuse. What does that do to our local budget? So what I had suggested was, yes, obviously we have the need for mental health services, substance abuse services, but maybe instead of requesting that be added to our school's budget, maybe we just request that the state have those services available. So the suggested language that I had come up with was Warren County requests that the state provide additional funding to the appropriate agencies and departments that specialize in mental health and substance abuse treatment so as to take the added burden off of the school districts and teaching staff. School systems desire adequate programs outside of the school system to which we can refer those in need. I know one of the other issues we had with this was it had suggested additional trainings for teachers, and the concern was do our teachers want to take additional training to be able to provide substance abuse counseling? Which is how I come up with this wording. Any thoughts?
I think this is good, and I can see how a bigger school district can probably afford to have some positions that deal with this, and we might not be able to. The one thing that this makes me think of is we went to the Take Your Legislator to Breakfast event, whatever that was called. And the superintendent from Page County was speaking about similar issues. And one of the things that she addressed was she feels like there's a need for more, I don't know if it would be legislation, but rules around sharing of information, because a school might refer a student to healthcare or mental health counseling, and then they may not hear anything back. So there's no requirement for that agency to tell us what happened, and it could be they just went right home and nothing happened, and we as a school wouldn't know. So I don't know how to word that, but like maybe add something about that to make it so that those partnerships can really be partnerships, and that we're able to share information about
And more interagency.
the student slash patient, yeah.
System
Okay.
and stuff, yeah.
But I agree with you as far as the funding. I would like for us to maybe not have to do that ourselves.
Okay.
That's a great
I'll see if
addition.
I can come up with something, maybe you can add to this draft.
Yeah, I can send you something.
And then the last legislative position was legislative position number 11, which was, it's not a current legislative position, it's a new one, but it deals with student transportation and school bus drivers. And the request was to loosen the restrictions on the CDL requirement, or it was very vague. And so I asked for clarification and questions, and the answer that was given was, well, we don't really know what legislation is coming, so we just want to make it easier to hire buses, and we want to reduce the requirements for bus drivers. I have concerns with that. It's a bus. The driver's alone on the bus with children, and there are other drivers on the road, so really it would depend on what
It would basically be like allowing somebody without that specialized training on that big mechanical bus to get behind the wheel.
Didn't
And
you say
drive
some
it.
of the comments were things like lowering the age
lowering the age,
and
not
lowering the
requiring a CDL.
Yeah, I'm not behind that.
and background check, like loosening up on background checks or something?
Yes, it
Which
was
some of that would be
all
our
just
own.
kind of on the table, and they
I
said
mean,
they
we
would
would
not-
wouldn't have
we
to
wouldn't.
lower our requirements though, right? I mean, if the state lowered their requirements, we could still require CDL, right?
We could. We
And we
still-
wouldn't
We
let
certainly would do
16-year-olds
background
drive
checks.
us.
No, I wouldn't.
No.
Yeah, we could still keep our requirements the same. Now granted, I don't know what that would do to our pool of drivers, or for that matter, at the same time, these are also people driving school buses through our county possibly, or on our state highways, so I don't know, I left this one blank and wanted to hear from you guys what you thought, if you want to just leave it alone and see what happens, or if we want to take a local stance on it, or whatever is the will of the board.
I don't have a strong opinion, except the potential recommendations that you shared when we spoke did not sound like things we as Warren County would want to do. I don't know how to word that, because I don't know that those really are the things that are,
Right, yeah, they were all,
Suggested.
everything was hypothetical, so
Right.
it was, let's see what the General Assembly proposes.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I know that is a huge issue throughout the state right now as bus drivers. There's a lot of counties that do not have enough bus drivers, so I'm sympathetic to that idea. I agree with you in not really being that comfortable with lowering the age too much, or, I mean, they need to be more than just a driver to be a school bus driver. I mean, it's not an easy job, and they need training. So I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence with this one. I certainly wouldn't want to have them mandate that we lower our requirements. But
Yeah,
as far
it
as
wasn't-
allowing other counties to,
Yeah, it wasn't a mandate, it was just a request to the state that they lower the requirements, so if we wanna just,
We can
Leave
continue
it.
to do what we're
right,
doing,
continue to do
to
what we're doing.
see what they
Yeah.
do, and, you know, certainly if it's not a mandate.
If you lower requirements, does that increase your insurance cost? That's the other thing to look at. As far as somebody having a CDL license, and I have one, that, just because they have that license does not mean that they're gonna be a safe driver. So it goes beyond that CDL certificate. I've had CDL drivers that were great, and I've had some that, with me, that didn't last a week because of, they just weren't safe. So having that designation CDL, if you got a good candidate and you can put him through some training and then get him, train them to get the CDL, it's kind of like that in-school teaching thing that we're looking at, then they stay with you. So some sort of help in getting a driver their CDL goes a long way with the driver, so.
So I think basically what I'm hearing is for our December meeting, we'll plan for the number 4, 5, and 7 to come up for a vote. And unless you hear something different on 11 or more details, which you probably won't, but if you do, I guess you can just kind of let us know and we can decide on that one. It doesn't seem like anybody has strong opinions on making
You
a
all wanted
decision.
to do it out.
Yeah, that sounds, I think those three.
Okay.
I would like to thank Ms. Salins for all the work that she put into this. We've never seen a presentation like this in the past as far as involvement with Virginia School Board Association. So thank you very much. I know it was a lot of time. This is an extra copy.
No, I really appreciate it too.
Thank you.
Mr. Rinaldi's right. We haven't ever really discussed any of the positions before. I appreciate the time that you put into doing it and trying to speak up for our county and letting us know more of what's going on. Really, I know you put a lot of work into it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I agree.
We
Do you know what the timeline is? Like, are these things we could maybe get on for next year? It sounds like from how you described it, like getting it on at the beginning is the better way to do it.
Yeah, so now what they're gonna do is they said sometime by the end of December, we should expect a new one of these little books to come out. So this one here is January 2022, so we'll have a new one that comes out January 2023. And from there are already a couple in here that I have highlighted that I don't really feel like accurately represent Warren County. But I have the forms in here where, and we all can go through this book and say, hey, you know what, I don't think this really represents us, I don't think this really represents us, and we'll have a similar work session, we'll fill out the form, we'll say, you know what, this is the legislative positions that we propose. And those get submitted, March, April is what the training said. Now, from there, though, they have to go to their positions committee, and the positions committee decides whether or not we will make it through that round to even being heard at the delegate assembly. There were other counties that had submitted proposals, and it frustrates me that Fairfax were the only ones that made it through. So
Do you get to go make your case like in March or April, you know? Do you get to, or do you just have to submit it? Like on
it's,
a
I believe
paper?
it's all submitted through paper. You give your submission of what you want the policy or the legislative position changed to, and then you give what they call the rationale.
Okay.
And it gives like a quick little synopsis of why you want this changed. So I'm hoping that some of us who are more conservative, smaller, similar counties, that could maybe band together on some of these so that we are represented equally.
Well, that's why I wonder who's on that committee. Is that like
It's
published somewhere?
selected, it's selected.
We know it's
by-
such and such county and whatever.
Yes, I have all that information in here. It's selected by the new, governing body of the VSBA. So that's all, they have a whole, they have a process for every process. So it's, let's see.
And can you collaborate with other, you know, smaller divisions and submit like a joint legislative?
I'm hoping so, yes. So there was the one position that was submitted by both Loudon and Fairfax, so they collaborated on it together. So,
That might make this a stronger case if we did that.
Mhm.
right, yeah. And I have started sending out feelers to other counties, but I'm finding there are some of the counties where there are board members who feel similarly, maybe their chair doesn't. So I'm sure you all probably saw the newspaper article where like Shenandoah County, they abstained from every vote during this because their delegate didn't agree with the other board, so rest of the board, so they decided to just abstain as kind of a compromise. I'm hoping I can get in touch with some of the counties who are not there, because I feel like having, 44 missing counties, that says that a large chunk of the counties in Virginia were not represented in this. And I don't know if they realize that the VSBA is sticking that county's name on it and lobbying on your behalf, whether or not you were there at all. So I don't know if they realize that. So it's going to take me time to get in touch with those other counties.
Well, thank you. I
Thank
want to
you.
echo
thank-
the thanks. I mean, I really appreciate it. You've been reaching out to all of us and really communicative, so I appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for this opportunity to do this. I appreciate it. So, thank you.
We'll have some more opportunities for you.
All right, next up we have the Learning Loss Program Grant Report. And I apologize, I'm not quite sure how to say
That's
your
fine.
name.
Tara Savage, I've been
Oh,
meaning
look
to
at
have,
you.
I've been meaning to have Karen come visit with us a couple of times, and we've had to continue to postpone. So this is the grant that we received, where we have our student support coaches and our student support coach instructional assistants. And Karen is running that program as she serves as an attendance officer at the elementary level. But Karen helped to bring those, she works with those student support coaches. I'm not gonna steal any of her thunder. I'm gonna let her tell you all about it. She's done a wonderful job, so thank you, Karen.
Good evening. I'm Karen Nair-Savage. You can call me Karen because the last name is difficult for everybody. My full-time job with Warren County is as the attendance officer for the elementary schools. During the summer of 2021, Dr. Ballinger called me in, and because I have my Virginia license as a qualified mental health professional, that was a requirement for the clinical supervisor for the grant program. So he offered that part-time position to me, and I accepted that for the duration of the grant, which is 2 years. I'm going to kind of go over what the grant was, and then I have my year-end report that I was going to give to you at the end of last school year, and then I also have the first quarter report for this school year. So our initial target population was to provide services to at least 50 students in K through 12 grades who would be referred to the program from the school administrators. The goals of the program were to improve grades and test scores, to increase school attendance, to establish positive relationships with school staff and peers, and to develop resiliency skills through the use of evidence-based activities. The grant enabled the hiring of the clinical supervisor, myself, 17 student support coaches, and 17 instructional assistants. These staff were placed in our 5 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, 2 high schools, as well as here at Diversified Minds and Brighter Futures. The focus on building relationships and resiliency skills for our elementary students were to be achieved by teaching self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, building relationships through connections, and responsible decision-making. For our middle and high school students, these skills would be achieved through social competence, building relationships through connection, problem solving, and a sense of purpose and future for them. The implementation of the grant, we had planned to implement the services in the same manner across settings. However, we quickly realized that each school had its own unique culture and unique needs. So working with the administrators in each building, and the student support coaches, the process began to develop a program that would provide the services that those students in each building really needed. My biggest message to everybody was flexibility is key in trying to roll out a new program. So our my end of the year, the overview was that the student support coaches and assistants really helped the students' growth both academically and emotionally during the 21-22 school year. Several administrators had shared with me that they had hoped that we could continue to have this staff as regular positions in the future, even though everyone is aware that the grant is done at the end of this school year. Running remediation groups in our elementary schools helped to close the gap that was caused by the pandemic, and in turn increased our students' self-esteem and confidence academically. On average, our reading growth was between 3 and 6 levels for students that participated in these small groups. I had 2 schools that reported they each had 1 student that increased their reading growth by 10 levels. It was felt that being able to have the smaller groups run by the program staff enabled the students to have that one-on-one attention they needed to increase their learning and comprehension. Our middle and high school staff also conducted remediation groups as well as one-on-one assistance, and they covered math, reading, and writing. The students that participated in the middle and high schools exhibited growth in the areas that they worked on, and the staff were able to assist the students in making up work assignments, completing tests, and studying for upcoming exams. In addressing the social emotional difficulties, staff in all the buildings worked closely with their guidance counselors. Some of the staff conducted guidance lessons to small groups, either with the guidance counselor or on their own. The guidance counselor provided the information for them to do that. They've dealt with behavior issues, anxiety, depression, peer adult relationship building, and self-esteem. Staff in a couple of our buildings were able to form what they refer to as lunch bunch groups, in which they utilize the resources that I purchased through the grant to assist students with academic and/or social emotional issues that they were experiencing. Utilizing research-based games and card games, the students were relaxed and built relationships with their peers and the adults that were with them. Some of the games were designed to help with processing skills. Academic improvement occurred during the students' increase in their processing abilities obtained from playing these games. In one of our elementary schools, 10 students were identified as having repeat behavioral issues. Those issues were greatly reduced as evidenced by 2 of the students had not had an office discipline referral in months. 3 students were moved to monitor status because their behaviors had improved. And 1 student that exhibited extreme anxiety and was refusing to take the SOL test was able to conquer the anxiety and did complete the SOL test. Our middle and high school staff offered emotional support and structured breaks for students that presented with anxiety, anger, or frustration. And the teachers reported that the students that were involved in this program, upon returning to the classroom, had improved attitude and better effort. In addressing the attendance issues, staff would do a check-in and check-out with students who had attendance problems. Coaches would call home when the student was not in school to discuss the issues and offer assistance if needed. And behaviors and attendance were shown to improve when students had a student support coach that was working with them. More attention to attendance occurred in our elementary schools than our middle and high schools last year. I have a couple anecdotes that I'll get through quickly. We had a 5th grade student. He presented at the beginning of the school year with a high level of non-compliance in the classroom. This was evidenced by poor grades, the lack of returned homework. His Chromebook was never charged, and he had poor test skills. In addition, the student was often involved in peer altercations that were primarily verbal. The student was easily frustrated, which would quickly escalate, and he had no ability to regulate himself. The student did not have an adult connection with a teacher or guidance counselor after the disruption of school from COVID. During COVID, the student had accomplished little work. The student support coaches began meeting with him during the first advisory. During this time, they utilized card games from a protocol called Equipping Minds. Equipping Minds uses different games to build processing speed, working memory, social skills. This evidence-based intervention improved test scores and behaviors across domains. The working theory used by the student support coaches was connection. Connection allows to influence, and the games doubled the student support coaches' platform for relationship building. The students' behavior began to show noticeable changes to include relationships with teachers and the support coaches. De-escalation took less and less time when he became frustrated, and the student used the connection with the support coach to help regulate his behavior. One card game that this student chose often was called Blink, and that's a matching game that allows for improvement of processing speed. The student experienced significant improvements in his behavior and academics. This was achieved truly through the expectations of the teacher and the parent, but also significant support at school to include the support coach relationship. Over the year, the student's grades and test scores improved significantly. The student started to participate in class, he had changed his friend group, he comes to school with his homework completed and his Chromebook charged, and he had the necessary tools and was able to maintain his regulation in most social and academic settings. On the rare occasions that he did become angry, he was able to regulate himself easily, or he reached out for the student support coach to help. In addition, he passed his reading SOL with a growth by 100 points. He did not pass his SOL in math, however. Moving over to E. Wilson Morrison, out of the 72 students that participated with our student support coaches and assistants, 96% were demonstrating behavioral improvement by the end of the school year. 74% of the students demonstrated growth in their grades and test scores. Over the course of the 21-22 school year, our target population, as we had stated, our intent was to serve 50 students in K through 12. I'm happy to tell you that we serviced 1,499 students over the year. This significantly exceeded our expectations. That would be the students that would be impacted by the program. We did have some difficulty with our high school population. We had 15 identified students that needed support, but they refused to work with any of the coaches or assistants when the services were offered. I did an assessment then at the end of the school year. For being the first year of this program, hiring all new staff and managing the program in all of our schools, I think overall we did very well. I stated that I would be meeting with the administrators and staff in each building prior to the start of next school year and identify how we could improve the program, what worked, what didn't, and reviewing the goals so that we were sure that everybody was on the same page to meet the goals. And I did do that at the beginning of this school year. I stated that I would develop a weekly schedule with our middle and high school staff so that I had more time to offer support to them. Since my main job, I'm working all in the elementary schools, it was easier for me to just kind of pop over and meet with the student support coaches and assistants, and I had a more difficult time getting to the middle and high school. I still am this year. I've tried to do better. I do have more communication, emails and phone calls, and they do all know, like if they need some support from me, they can call me, and that I will come there as soon as I can. I also needed to develop a format for collecting data and distribute that to the student support coaches at the beginning of this year so that I could ensure everybody was collecting the same data and the same information. That would be easier for everybody to track, including myself, because last year it was really difficult because I got from all 11 schools, I got the different information in different formats, and it took me hours to sort through it. So I did, over the summer, develop a collection form, and I handed that out to all the student support coaches, answered their questions. It was much easier for them and much easier for me to obtain the data, which I will give you now from the first quarter report for the 2022-2023 school year. I'll begin with staffing. Since we were able to maintain the majority of our staff, it enabled us to begin providing services immediately with programming that we already had in place. Currently, our student support coach positions are fully staffed at each school. The student support instructional assistants are fully staffed, except we need 1 at LFK and 2 at Warren County High School. Services, our staff hit the ground running this year because we already had everything in place and everybody knew what was expected. So we were able to start providing services to the students on day 1. I will give you a list of some of the services that were being provided in all of our schools. Addressing attendance, we have a check-in and check-out, and that's happening this year in our middle and high schools, where last year we didn't really have that in place. So when they check in, the staff welcomes the students in the morning when they arrive. This is building that relationship so they get to know and I expect to see this person. They tell them they're happy to see them and see how their day started. Did you have any difficulties at home? Was there any problems on the bus? Just to kind of give them an opportunity, if they had a rough start to their day, they have somebody to talk to about it. And then the checkout, the staff meets them as they're walking out of the school. How was your day? Did you have any problems? Again, building that relationship, and then they stay to, well, I can't wait to see you tomorrow, or something like that, to try to get them to understand they have somebody there, because a lot of our kids didn't have those connections. Some of the groups that we're doing, we have the lunch groups. We do Ripple Effects, which is a computer-based program that we got through special services. I think there's like 100 modules, and it's everything from dealing with anger to attendance to self-esteem, all kinds of things. So the student support coaches identify things that the students are having problems with, and they have them watch that, and they answer questions, and they're sitting there working with them one-on-one. That's in our elementary schools. We have small group and individual testing, academic supports. We have the connection and game breaks to address behaviors, intensive sensory movement breaks, which happen daily in elementary and up to 3 times per week in the middle and high schools. And what that is like there's kids that they just need to move. They need to get out of the classroom and they do laps, or they have some kind of movement and then just kind of refocus and then get them back into the classroom. We are doing reading remediation and literacy intervention, remediation in math, reading, and writing in our middle and high schools. Proximity support in the classrooms is happening in our middle and high schools, and what that means is that if they can go into the classroom, they push into the classroom and sit for a few minutes with them, talk to them, allow them to come out with them or go back in, those kinds of things. The de-escalation and return to class, if they're having problems and they're disruptive in the classroom, the student support coaches can go in, pull them out, give them some de-escalation techniques, and then get them back into the classroom as quickly as we can. Pre-counselor intervention, sometimes our guidance counselors are busy and not available, so our student support coaches work with the students on like breathing and grounding activities to just get them to calm down and stay with them until the counselor is available. And then we also purchased Mind Up curriculum, which is a research-based brain-focused strategies for learning and living. And there's certain activities, and they do crafts, those different kinds of things to enforce and teach the kids, this is for our elementary and middle school, how our brains work and how they control their brain. And the brain doesn't control you, you control your brain. So again, for our target population, as I just stated, at the end of last school year, we provide services to 1,499. After collecting the data from all 11 schools for our first quarter, we provided services to 1,145 students. So I was thrilled with that because, like I said, we just jumped right in and started day one. So we did have a total of 30 students or families that refused support services. So it was either the middle and high school students saying, no, I don't want this, or a family didn't return the permission slip for their child to participate in the Lunch Bunch group or the Ripple Effects program. As my update then is, as the year progresses, I will include in my reports the percentages of student grades, tests, and behavioral improvements of the students participating in the programs. Obviously, I can't do that the first quarter, but moving forward, I'll be able to get those percentages. And then I will provide quarterly reports in January and March of 2023 and a year-end report in May of 2023. If anybody has any questions. Okay, thank you.
So this is a program that even in my superintendent's advisory, I have my teachers are asking me about student support coaches going on longer than just the 2 years that we've had them. And so they are really providing a service. And actually, all of our student support coaches, didn't they go through LLI training with
Yes.
Faunus and Pinnell?
Yes.
So that gives them that base to be able to pull those small group of students in and do those one-on-one or small group reading intervention skills. So when she was talking about levels, that would be the levels of Faunus and Pinnell.
Right.
Just so that you're aware. But yeah, we did provide those trainings for them as well. So, but they're an integral part, and we've actually got a few of our. Actually, I know there's one of our student support coaches that will be taking one of our guidance counselor positions
Yes.
pretty soon.
And we do have some that are going to be teachers
Yes.
as
Yes.
well.
So this has been a really great program for us and for our students and for our.
Yeah,
Our
it's
school
really
system.
had a positive effect for
Just a quick question. I know
Sure.
you said you had 30 families that declined the services. So when the student support coaches work with the student, before they even intervene and work with the student, somebody calls them and says, hey, we, like that, do you have permission, on those 1,000 kids, or how does that work?
Typically, if we're doing, if they're doing the Lunch Bunch groups, if they're doing a small group, or the Ripple Effects program, whatever, if we're doing a specific program, then yes. Like the remediation, we don't ask for permission for.
If a kiddo's just maybe having a really rough day.
They can, we don't add, yeah, they can pull them out.
For them to help them just for that day.
Right.
Talk to them. They don't
Yes.
have to have the individual
Parents.
student parent.
No, no, and the kids that are refusing are middle and high school. I mean, the elementary kids, they just do whatever they have them doing. But the middle and high school kids have said, no, I'm not interested, I don't want that. And we did also have, we did have an attendance, we had an interdisciplinary team meeting for a high school student, and part of the recommendation was that they changed his hours of coming to school because he was having a lot of problems coming to school. So we changed his hours and then set up for him to meet with the student support coach. Because I was at the interdisciplinary team meeting, I talked to him about my student support coach in his building, and he agreed to do that. And he has been doing that and is being successful now with his attendance and completing his work.
I was just gonna say, I wonder if there's an opportunity with those students who declined, or the families who declined, to maybe track their data as well, and that could be a control group to compare.
Yeah, we
Might be
could.
interesting.
I can try to get that information. Because I think they do have food declined. So I can look into that and try to do that, and we'll include that in the next report if I can get it.
Thank you for sharing with us.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Next up, we have grounds maintenance updates, and that's Mr. Smith and Mr. Levisay.
First, let me just give you a quick handout, just with some of our thoughts or notes for consideration before our discussion here.
While Mr. Levacy is passing that out, our purpose for this evening in this particular item is to give you an update and so forth on our groundskeeping. Since the 1st of April, we will be taking over our middle schools as well as our elementary schools. We currently mow at our high schools, and I'd ask that Mr. Levesey attend here this evening to provide an update on that, so I'll turn that over to.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, and Buck and I, Mr. Smith and I have been talking. And first, we owe the board the due diligence to look at what type of delivery method or business model we should operate under. Again, prior to the county assuming responsibility back in 2019, you may recall it was done with our in-house staff and in-house equipment. So we felt we needed to look at that and compare that with a rough order of magnitude estimated cost, because they are significant costs involved in this. Again, we do have currently 2 in-house staff for our high schools. That's working out very well. And if it in-house, we would require 4 more staff to support the middle and the elementary schools. Looking at our salary structure, and for employees with 3 to 5 years of experience, we would expect an average annual salary of that $35,000 plus a year, okay? And then by 4 people, you can see what the annual compensation would be. That is without the benefit rate that, we pay on top of the salary. So that's just straight salary. And then we've got the initial or first year cost for additional equipment. 4 more mowers, roughly $14,000 each. So we're looking at that. And then our fuel consumption, which is a number that kind of shocked me, and only because we track the consumption for the new mowers we've got at the high schools. Running those big mowers 6 to 7 hours a day burns about 11 gallons a day. That's a lot more than, of course, when you're running pretty fast and wide open, those big commercial mowers do consume a lot of gas. So you're looking at pretty significant fuel cost, I think, of around $30,000 a year. And again, I'm estimating at about $3.50 a gallon and 20 work days per month or 20 mowing days per month is what we spend at the high school. So your total annual first year cost over $227,000. Again, first year. Subsequent years, you drop off those equipment costs, so you don't have those. And then the next was to outsource or contract our ground services for the middle and the elementaries. No staff to hire. I will say Mr. Smith and I have talked, and we feel, one, it'd be very difficult to not only get positions approved, but get 4 people hired by the 1st of April. Fill those 4 vacancies, if we decided to go that route. We don't have to buy the equipment. We don't have to maintain it. And we don't have to put the fuel in it. And lastly, based on the bids that we received last April, we're looking at, hopefully bids somewhere in the $100,000 range. Now that's, again, we went back out for a second solicitation last year to hopefully reduce cost, reduce the frequency of mowing, and the other big factor we put in was the ability for us as the owner, which is typical in a lot of service contracts, to reserve the right to award a contract in whole or in part and to multiple vendors, with the hopes that maybe smaller businesses would want to participate. So we've estimated those costs to be about 100 of those bids. We go back out, would be about 100,000 a year. On here, I said 2 lowest bids. We did receive 3 bids. The highest bid was $100,000 plus more than the second lowest. So if I put that into the bid average, that throws the cost up to what I consider to be a realistic number. So we just wanted to talk to you all tonight, give you this information, give you a chance to give us your input, any questions on it, and contracted wise, the timeline would work very well for award for a spring start of April 1. If it is contracted, we post a solicitation right after the Thanksgiving break. If you need job walks or mandatory meetings, early December, and bids due mid-January to come back to the board the 1st of February for consideration and approval if we decided to outsource it. So
The plan is to keep the 2 high schools the same.
keep them the same. And I think everybody would agree, the primary reason for that is not only the size of the site, and when they're not mowing, they're weeding, they're doing everything, but it's the competition sports fields. As we all know, those take a little more maintenance and grooming because they'll be lining the fields and things of that night. So it's our intent to keep them there. So
And so that's working out well.
It's working out very
So-
well.
So come spring season, those fields are gonna look good.
Yep, no, yeah. Believe me, between the
They
activities,
didn't look very good last year.
there's a lot of rain last year and not a lot of staff. You know, we were
Right.
fighting to keep the high schools mowed until we got those positions filled, number one. And we didn't fill them, weren't able to fill both of them at the same time. So we had to buy some contracted services to finally get back in the groove again.
And I think, Mr. Levis, is also, you brought in some outside
We
companies
did.
to look at a fertilizing program
Yes.
or maintenance program, because the field was not in a very good routine as far as when it comes to.
It was more than just the grass mowing, okay? So we had to kind of go and do a kickstart, especially with Warren County High School
Yes.
on the turf over
Exactly
there.
what happened.
Okay, and I agree, but it started coming back very nicely, so it's finally filling back in. Now it's all brown, but we do have the turf back there, so.
And I think part of that brown is that, 'cause there's
That's just
Bermuda,
the seasonal.
and there's Bermuda that's also under there this time of the year, that's gonna turn a little bit brown, and those fields.
Turns a lot brown.
Yeah, a lot brown. It's playoff football should have brown field.
Yeah.
But also, as you mentioned, it's a field maintenance plan, and we've been able to work on putting together a maintenance plan for those fields. So I think that's one reason why you see the fields look the way they do now. They're much better than last year. I mean, night and day.
They do require some extra skills.
Oh, it takes quite a bit more TLC, it's just not mowing. But yes, the proposed maintenance plan was a 3-year restoration effort. To go in and do it all in one season, you need the time to do it and the money. So the vendor has been doing this work for years, proposed a 3-year maintenance program that guaranteed it will be coming back. It would be fully the way it should be within 3 years. We think it's gonna be in 2 now. Okay, so between the correct fertilization, and I mean correct, aeration, what they call a deep tine, and a top dressing with some new topsoil, it filled in very nicely. So I'm hoping, by fall next year, we're back in business again. So,
Mr. Lewis, I really like the idea of using multiple vendors at the schools, because it opens up to using small business folks, and most of them would be residents of Warren County, hopefully.
it could be, yes, you'll get a lot more local participation.
Right.
Now, your bigger vendors, they say, well, if there's a possibility, I'm higher on this school versus the other guy, I might not want to bid the contract because I can't get all the schools. That possibility exists too, but I think it benefits when we have that right to award in whole or in part and to multiple vendors. We could, and I would love to have a couple of small vendors, especially for smaller elementary schools. E. Wilson's barely got anything to mow, and A.S. Roads isn't horrible, so it would be very beneficial. So,
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
all right, thank you.
Next up, we have policy discussion with Mr. Smith.
All right, thank you. This one pertains to the a policy IIA, which is instructional materials, which is going to deal with, in July, I believe, was put out model policies concerning instructional materials with the sexual explicit content. And so this moves that by the 1st of January, we are to have a policy in place that would be approved by our board, have a policy in place that would relate to our instructional materials that we have in our classrooms. We have, as you have as part of your documents here, policy IIA, and in this policy, you will notice that in red are either parts of the policy that we are suggesting. We have used our attorney to help in this process since we are now not using VSBA as it relates to our policies, but we're using our attorney to do so. And we have put together, or our attorney has put together, that we would like to share with our school board here this evening, which would be our policy. And then Mrs. Bragg and I, as part of this, would have to create a procedure, a process of when, if someone had a concern about some materials, what would be the process that we would go through with that. Could be very similar to our process that we have if there's a book, or as we went through with the library materials and those type of things, what would be the process that someone would bring forward. So we'd just like to have a discussion, or just to get some input, some guidance from the policy that we have here to move forward. If there are things which you would like to see added or so forth, that's what we're here this evening to.
And this is really the first reading
Yes.
of the policy. Just to let you look at it, but this was from Senate Bill 656. According to legislation, the VDOE was supposed to release something July 1. We received it in September. So now as schools work through this, once this comes out from the VDOE, then the attorneys have to take time to look at it and review everything, and then we go through it. So really, this is just our guiding policy. This is not our procedure. So within this policy, it basically states, the superintendent shall establish a process for identifying instructional materials with sexually explicit content. So what I've asked Mr. Smith and Ms. Bragg to do is to put a committee together that is going to consist of an elementary administrator, counselor, and teacher, a middle school administrator, counselor, teacher, and the same thing at the high school. And then and librarians, one from each level. And then they are going to meet, they're going to discuss what's the process that we have to have. So really, any materials that we find that maybe have sexually explicit content in it, we have to list it on the website, and we have to notify, and it doesn't keep us from not using it. So for instance, like anatomy and physiology, or a biology, we may have to list the entire biology book because there may be something that shows an anatomical figure of a human. And so
Sorry, could I interject? What I read in here, though, it specifically eliminates the need to identify anything in biology. It was, as part of that, it said anything that's being presented in a biology book that has anatomy or things like that, it didn't fall into, it defined it as, sexually explicit content. Was bestiality, lewd exhibition of nudity. Nudity is defined in section 18.2-390. Sexual excitement, sexual conduct, or sadomasochistic abuse, or coprophilia, urophilia, or fetishism. And then there was a section in here, and I have to scroll through and find it, because I was wondering the same thing, are we gonna have to identify what's in our biology books? But it was a specific exclusion was in here.
I do not remember seeing, and I've been through that policy. I've read through this and looked at the model policies that the state provided in their document, which is attached. Because what it really talks about, what we took from this, and this was our conversation with Mr. King, was that anything that is instructional, we have to list on that website. Yeah, because when they use the term instructional material, and instructional materials mean the content used by one or more students for an educational purpose, regardless of its format, whether printed, audiovisual. You know, that's like one of the things that Heather and I was talking about, and Buck, when we were talking today. Heather was, of course, her background is history, and she was talking about maybe some of the visual arts and things that we may have to list on here because there's a representation of a picture which does meet the definition for nudity or something of that nature. And it is maybe in that textbook. And I don't know, you can probably expand upon that a little bit better than I can.
Well,
Heather.
I was just, I agree with what you're saying about some of the, shall we say, more explicit things that are listed in the definition. I do think that, and it's not in this policy spelled out, the definition that the state uses for nudity is where I believe, what I would refer to as our instructional materials. So I'm referring to classroom textbooks, that sort of thing, not necessarily library books, but textbooks that we purchase. It's really within the nudity definition where there may be some things that we possibly need to list versus some of the more explicit things that are listed here under the definition of sexually explicit content. I was reading the definitions a little more closely or tightly probably as you were, and sort of wondering, like, I don't really feel like that our instructional materials have some of these things listed in them. And if they do, perhaps we should have a policy. So, you know, I think that that's some of the discussion that we need to have in that committee is, you know, how do we make sure that we're meeting the intention of the policy without, you know, maybe having to list every page in the biology book and that sort of thing.
And that was just one of the conversations that Mr. Smith and I had with you know, Mr. King. And that was one of the things that he had mentioned as far as when looking at that, he said, you know, if you have a textbook that has and when you look at code and the definition of nudity, and if you have that in there, then it refers back to the policy. And so then our conversation with him was, you would have to list that book because now it's going to the term of what nudity is as defined by Virginia code. And that was just our conversation with Mr. King and working through that and trying to see how that all would play out for us. But really what we want to develop is our procedures moving forward. You know, looking at this, I've talked to a lot of superintendents and nobody has really, we're building the plane as we fly it. Everybody is just confused on how this is happening. Some are doing this, some are doing that, some still are like, when you get something, send it to me. But looking at this, what are we going to do with our processes and procedures? Yes, we may miss some things. So what we do want to put in there, whatever our procedure is that if you as a parent see something, let us know. Here's the process to let us know so that we can evaluate it and see if we need to get it posted. Because there may be some things that we miss as staff. And it's not going to be intentional, but it will just be as we go through this process and we create that catalog.
So this, I know that Mr. Smith referred to having, you know, if a parent does reach out and say, I saw this, having a procedure in place for how that would work. But this would be a little bit different than the library book challenge because this will be, hey, I saw this, and then the committee just looks at it and it fits into this definition and then it's clear cut, yes or no, it needs to be identified. Right, this isn't a challenge from a parent.
Right,
This is
it's not a
hey, you
challenge,
guys
it's
missed posting this.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We missed listing this on the website.
And I believe that in the policy itself, it also, or even in the sample policy, that if someone says that this is explicit, I mean, we would have to provide like an alternative type of assignment. You may have like a multiple, as Bragg was mentioning earlier, perhaps you would not just have one set of classic novels or something for the class. You may have multiple novels and so forth going on, multiple book groups going on at one time.
So I think to answer your question, if we miss something, list something, and I'll just use an example of like the Statue of the David. Under this policy, that would have to be listed as, in history class or English class, we may show this representation of the sculpture in art class. So it would have to be listed, but let's say we missed that, and a parent said, hey, you missed this, then I think we could look at it, the definition, and say, sure, we'll post that on our list. If they would then say, I don't want my child exposed to that, we would have to find an alternative assignment or supplement material that removed that for that student. But just because we missed it doesn't mean we can't use it in instruction. It would just mean we would have to add it to the list, give it 30 days for public notice, and then be able to use it in the class. So it would be a parent that would say, I don't want my child exposed to that. Then if they wanted to go further to challenge something, then I think it would fall under the challenge policy. So it's kind of a little bit multi-stepped as to how far the parent wants to go. If it's just, I believe this fits the sexually explicit policy, you didn't list it, we agree, we put it on the website, we wait 30 days, they still say they don't want their student using it, we have to find a supplemental assignment for them. If they want to go one step further to challenge the book or something like that so that it's taken literally off the shelf, they would have to go through that policy. So does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think that's the part that just, from the beginning, making sure whoever reviews that is clearly defined.
Yeah, so a person could certainly pull it from their student, but to pull it from the shelf or the instructional material, I think it would probably have to go through the challenge policy
Yeah.
to pull it for every kid.
Because as Mr. King mentioned to Buck and I, if you identify it, it's not that you can't use it. It's just you have to list it, and parents can have that option to say yes or no. So it's not taking it away per se, it's.
Kind of like the family life education, right? Parents could always opt out of that, and this would just be also identifying, like you said, art. or
Taking away half the health books.
The one area that did concern me with this, at the section Roman numeral 5B, with regard to how the parents can review it, the part where we talk about unless it's going to be posted online or whatnot, unless not technically feasible or prohibited by the copyright protection, I do not want to run into the same problems that we ran into with the SEL stuff where parents were being denied access at home. They were having to come into the school, have a principal watch over them as they've paid for childcare for their younger kids so they can sit there and go through hours worth of curriculum. We need to just keep this upfront, easily accessible from the get-go. If the parent can't have it shared with them online, and the book needs to be able to go home with them, they should be able to view this ahead of time in the comfort of their own home without inconvenience. And they should not have to take time out of their work schedule, hire a babysitter and come into the schools and review this material. It should be done at their convenience.
Well, I mean, as far as with what the policy says, as far as, if it's not feasible to provide that, or if it's against the copyright, we would just have them, as we've always done, is allow them to come into the school.
But that's like we ran into with the second step thing. You're gonna end up with more pushback from the parents the more you try to limit how they can review the material. Parents are not gonna try to steal this copyrighted material. All books are copyrighted. Textbooks can go home. Parents should be able to access this in their home. We're gonna have angry parents who are saying, hey, I had to get a babysitter, I had to take off work just so I could come in and review this. So let's just make this as easy for the parents as humanly possible. Let them review it in the comfort of their own home. And I mean, I've never seen a company put up the copyright fight like Second Step did. I mean, it looks like they want to hide something. So let's not give that impression going forward.
Well, I think that's what the policy is saying, is that we do need to do that. And then it's just giving like an alternate if it's illegal to do that, if we're being.
How could that possibly be illegal?
I'm not a lawyer. If our lawyer says this is prohibited by copyright, then we would need to find another solution. But hopefully that wouldn't happen. I mean, I agree with you. If we can make it easier for parents, I certainly would prefer to do that.
I think we don't have an example of this right now.
Right.
So
I don't even know what we're.
I think
What we're saying, we
think
can't see it.
the wording is done in a very clever manner in which we're going to have issues with, oh, we can't show that one, it's copyrighted, they're gonna have to come into the school, and you know we're gonna end up with the onslaught of emails of complaints following this. If we are just upfront, 100% open, honest, transparent, this is what we're gonna be showing your kids, take a look at it at home, in the comfort of your own home. You know, the copyright violation would come in if the parent started reproducing the information and distributing it or whatnot. I cannot, under any stretch of the imagination, figure out why material that could be presented to a child, to a parent in a school could not be read in the comfort of their own home.
Did Brad King put this on here? Brad King put this on here?
So that is actually word for word from the sample policy from the VDOE.
And I'm suggesting we change it.
It says we will provide online access.
Unless, well, then you've got your own license.
Unless it's
Shall
not technically
provide-
feasible or prohibited. I mean, if it's
Why
prohibited,
would
I don't
we
think we should be
prohibit
doing it. We wouldn't prohibit it. Copyright law would prohibit it. That's what it's saying,
How,
unless it's
but
illegal.
where is that in copyright law? As we had the attorney that had emailed us saying that the copyright of the SEL, this is the most ridiculous thing, this is not what copyright law says, blah, 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 blah. It's, if you're gonna show a kid something
We don't
that's
even have a
copyrighted.
case that we're looking at, so like how can
Oh,
we
but
answer
it's
that
gonna come
question?
up, these
Well, then
things
we'll
are
talk about it.
cleverly
Like, how can
worded,
we-
but once the policy's the policy, the policy's the policy. These
So are you
things-
saying that we should word it that we will violate copyright? I mean.
No, and you know that that's not what I am
Right.
suggesting.
So like,
at all.
I'm trying to think of an example. Let me
SEL,
share
let
this.
me
Let me,
provide
I was gonna say,
example.
cause, yeah, 'cause- okay, yeah, like,
Let's give us an example of what.
So, and I'm not suggesting that there's anything that fits this policy in our middle school textbook for science, but let's say that there is. So our middle school science textbook is an online-only textbook. There is not a hard copy to send home. Now, our biology book, we have class sets of the biology book. You know, we could potentially, if a parent says, can you please send a biology book to my house so I can look over it? We could certainly do that because there's a hard copy student edition to provide. But our middle school science curriculum does not have that option. So we can do the same thing that we did for Second Step, which is reach out to the company and ask, may we have a demo account that parents could log into or something like that so that they can see it from home? I do think that then falls into what you're saying, that's up to the company to determine, you know, yes, we're able to give a demo site, or no, we're not. If they say we can't provide a wide open access demo site to everyone, so the answer is no, then in that case, I think where our policy, and it's not just this new part, it's actually, I believe, in our instructional materials policy on parental review, they would then have to come into the school to review the materials.
so let me ask you a question in that case. So that is online, so I'm guessing the that, well, that's what I was gonna ask, is how do so if the teacher assigns homework, if it's only online, how does the student access it? So they would be able to look at it at home through their student account because it's gonna be the same.
So
Textbook.
you have your parent, you have your student log in and say, I'm gonna flip through your
Gotcha.
book and take a look at it.
That's exactly like.
that
the
was-
example I was
yes.
thinking that.
Yeah, like that would certainly be an option, but if you're looking, so, again, you know, if you're looking ahead, you know, for example, sixth grade science at Skyline Middle School was on block scheduling. So so our kids that are coming into science next semester in 6th grade, they don't have a science login. So if a parent wants to look at it 30 days ahead of time, there's not a login available for them right now because their kid isn't in science, so therefore they don't have a science login.
So would
So,
they be able to, if they contacted you 30 days ahead of time, because they wanted to preview it before, would they be able to get access to that? We'd have to ask.
in that case, they may have to come in because we can't assign a license that we've paid for to a parent. We need that license for a kid. Does that make sense?
Why couldn't you at 30 days prior to a course starting, issue that child access to the program?
We have a limited number of licenses. So let's say I have 200 6th grade science licenses and I've got 198 kids in that class. I'm using all those licenses until the end of the semester, and then when the semester rolls over, I change those out for the kids currently in that course.
If you weren't using all the licenses, then you could do that.
Assign out a parent,
Huh?
like assign it out to a parent.
To a child that's already registered for the course. If you've got extra licenses and a child is signed up for the course for second semester, why couldn't he be issued that
How does that work?
30
with
days in
roster?
advance?
Yeah. I think it's going to interfere with our rostering, I think, but I'll defer to Tim
Tim on-
to that. Like, because the textbooks are, the codes and things are, like, the passwords are generated through the rostering system, right?
Correct, correct.
So the kid's not rostered to the class.
To the school itself.
I mean, and I know it sounds like not a big deal, but if you, like, rostering textbooks is super complicated. I mean, it takes weeks to get them, yeah, online. It takes them weeks to get them right. But, you know, so in that case, I think that, you know, you would have to say, you would come in. Off the top of my head, science is some middle school science is one of the few textbooks that doesn't have a hard copy textbook with it. I mean, you're talking a very limited, not that I'm aware of. I think it is an online program, period. That's the way it's.
It was adopted as online
Roster
only.
just one extra computer, like to have an actual school copy and you just say, you let the parent check this out, take it home, read the stuff, bring it back.
We can look into it and see, I mean, one thing that we also have to remember, it's not the material. A lot of times it's the intellectual properties with the programming that those companies spend millions of dollars in developing that they don't want to get out, and that's where the copyright comes in. So I'm not opposed to doing what we can to give access to however we can give access. But I am gonna wanna check, and I would check with Brad or our attorney to make sure that if we did something of this nature, would that be violating this copyright law? And are we going to be putting us in a liable situation if something was to happen? And just go through that and see how that would work out. But I understand what you're saying. Could you put one on one Chromebook
Right.
and everybody that wants it comes check out that Chromebook? I don't see.
Some work, we, attorneys work for you, so if we instruct our attorney, figure out some way that we can give parents access in the convenience of their own home. I know Brad, he's clever, he's gonna figure something
Well,
out.
and it sounds like it would be the online
What the materials
curriculum.
are, and then we can make a plan to
We're
show
not
those
changing
materials. We don't even know what they are yet.
Challenging.
Like, we're not changing textbooks, these are the same textbooks, like, basically now we're just making a policy for the things we already have, and we're just identifying
Yeah.
stuff. Do
Well,
parents
just
want
I mean,
to
identify.
can
balance?
we be clear as to why this policy came up? I mean, we've all seen, I'm sure, the school board meetings from Loudon and Fairfax. It's not science textbooks that are being argued here. It's English teachers assigning books that have bestiality and sadomasochism very
Exactly.
graphically.
It'll be a novel and
spelled
it's
out.
very easy.
It would be
to check out the
listed,
parents,
it'd be
you know?
listed on the
Get all
website.
that.
But this just says instructional materials.
Right.
It does not distinguish between what it is when it says instructional materials. So that means
Maybe a worksheet.
It could be a worksheet. It could, so you could have a book in the library that a student can go in there and check it out for pleasure because they like to read it. But then if that student goes in and checks that book out for a book report, now it becomes instructional material. So that's the kind of issue that we're dealing with as we look through this and how this is going to be modeled. So as far as working through it, we're gonna do whatever we can to work through it. We wanna have a comprehensive list as far as what we can find and have our parents support us if they do see something that we missed to help us out through it. But it's you know, right now, this is just the policy setting it up for what we're going to do or what they're going to do with the team as far as putting our process in place. You know, I can have a conversation with Brad about certain things on copyrights and see what his suggestion is and work through that. But I'm not opposed if a child has access to it at home, the parent can view it at home. But if they don't have access to it at home and it's only accessed in the classroom
Let's give them
because
access.
it's in that classroom for a specific reason and, you know, that's the group that they're working for, then, you know, we'll work through whatever we need to work through.
Yeah, we should be proud of this, whatever it is, whatever curriculum we're using, we should be proud enough of what we're teaching these children that we are more than happy to give their parents access to it at home, not try to put up these random barriers to try and exclude and limit the number of parents who are able and willing to do so. So that's what I would hope our county would set as their model policies is a very open, easy to work with. We have nothing to hide. Thankfully, you know, I don't think that we are doing what has been done in other counties. And we're happy and willing to provide that information to you so you feel comfortable and secure with sending your child to our schools. And that just makes it easier for all of us, you know?
Going back to the registration for the classes, so if one Chromebook, and I think you touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to open that up. If one Chromebook was registered for that ongoing class, and a student was going to take the second semester class, which would have been, you know, a repeat of the first semester. So with that being said, that one Chromebook could be registered to the class, take up a slot, and then if a parent's child was going into that program and they wanted to look at it 30 days ahead of time, they could have that Chromebook, which would already be licensed and registered with the first semester. Did I explain that
Yeah.
correct?
When I say potentially, because the license isn't registered to a Chromebook, it's like I would have, like
It's
we would have
registered
to
to an
create
individual.
like a fake kid,
We can
perhaps.
register it to you,
Like we-
Mr. Rinaldi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
yeah,
put
like
you
we
as
might
the
would
person
have to
the
put
seat.
in, you know, but then that means we have to create that student a power school schedule. Like all this stuff in the background, and Tim can speak to it much more eloquently than I can. You know, it all sort of interconnects and talks to one another. A kid gets access to the textbook through a power school schedule, you know, therefore the kid has to exist and be enrolled in our schools in order to have a power school schedule. So it just, you know, there may be a way to work around it. I think if we get to that point, I don't think that there is any intention of us to hide or limit access. Everything that we can provide electronically, we will. I do think there needs to be, you know, a reciprocal relationship to understand that some of the limitations may not be Warren County Public Schools. It may be the textbook company or whatever, and we need to work together. And that wouldn't be in contradiction to the way we've always been able to review textbooks and things like that through the years. So I think it just needs to be a reciprocal relationship and understand, you know, we're going to put everything that we can available electronically at the fingertips of the parents so that it is convenient for them. We're not hiding anything. But if there is a circumstance, which again, we don't even know if there is one, it may require some assistance with the parent to work out an appropriate time to come and see it. It's not an attempt to be difficult, it's an attempt to meet the request.
But you
Because
mentioned
if-
sixth grade science was all online. Do you, and I know you might not have this like right now, but do you have an estimate of how many textbooks are in that same situation? I mean, I know we have a huge amount of different,
Where it's just an
yeah,
online
like you said,
curriculum.
sixth grade, because
That
I'm
was the
sure
one that
it's
Bob-
probably not at the elementary at all.
That was the one that popped in my
Right.
head because it is an online only
Right.
text. And at high school, if there's something at high school, it is going to be limited to like a specific course, like our English book at K-12 would be, available both in hard copy and online. Math, I'm thinking, is probably the same way. It's possible we have like an electronic only for like an astronomy elective because we didn't buy a hardback book. The middle school science one is the only one that really pops in my head right off.
So not a lot.
It would not be a lot as far as, grade level textbooks, subject level textbooks goes. No, it would not be a lot. Like I say, it's possible that there's maybe like an something pretty specific and narrow. Like our biology book is online and we have a hard copy of it. So, for the most part, that's going to be the case with the majority of our curriculum.
And you just have to remember, if we're listing something on our website, we want to be able to do whatever we can to give access. I mean, if we're going to have it on a list, which says, hey, you need to check this out, we definitely want to provide whatever access we can, because we're saying, here's something that, if you want to check it out, check it out. This is something that we identified.
And let me just sort of clarify. I'm not sure there's anything in the middle school science textbook that's going to meet this curriculum. So if it is not listed, it is not because we don't want anyone to have access to it. I mean, when I think about these definitions and even reading them more broadly, I think about biology, anatomy at the high school level, not life science at the middle school level necessarily. So I'm not sure there's anything in that middle school book that would even meet the parameters of this policy, but I just wanted to say that in case it's not on the list.
I would also think as items go onto the list, that's when they can be identified as how would a parent access
make a
this?
plan.
Like, you would know if you're putting something on there that it's gonna be difficult for some reason. So then right away, just know, how can we work around it?
I mean,
And even-
if we're going to put it on, we have to list it on there. We want to be sure that we give whatever
Access
access we
to
can
it.
give. I mean, because we're saying, here's something we identified. We definitely want to give whatever access we can give to it for you guys for a parent to review it, because we've put it out there. So that's one of the, whatever we would have to do to make sure that happens. I mean, we would work through that.
So we'll have a second reading in December.
Yes, ma'am.
I think what's important to remember, and I think that's what Ms. Salins is saying, is the perception on how we do this. If we have poor perception on this whole thing, then that's going to take up a lot of staff time, a lot of school board member time, et cetera. So I think the goal should be, the perception has to be open and do whatever we have to do to get information to parents.
Yeah, and I agree with Ms. Salem as far as when it comes to making sure that we're providing as much access as we can to our parents.
Right.
We want to be transparent.
Sure. But we have to be
It's just-
able
there may be-
to project that.
There may be some limitations that we would have to, that maybe we just couldn't work through, or something that we just don't have the capability of doing. But we do want to put out there whatever we can and give those parents the access that they need.
But hopefully we're doing business with companies that are proud of the product that they're putting out and will bend over backwards to make sure that parents can easily review it. And then we need to question and make known to the companies who are not willing to do that for us, that, maybe their product isn't right for us and we'll look elsewhere going forward. so that we can have that open, honest, established trust with the parent, because that was the spirit of this legislation that was passed, is to try to build back that trust between parents and the school system.
I think we're on the same page with that. This list is gonna be on the main division website, broken down by schools, by
So, yeah,
grade.
so that's one thing that we will work through, because, you know, will there be a need to list it on the main division website if your child is in elementary and you're needing to look at a high school, you're not in high school. So it may be that we list it on each school site, that as we work through this, and it may be that you see a list at Skyline High School or Warren County High School, the middle school. If there is by chance something at an elementary school, that it would be listed on the elementary site. I mean, that's kind of what I would be thinking, because as a parent, you're not gonna be necessarily concerned about what is going on at LFK because your daughter goes to Resi's. So you may be looking at the Resi site more often than you are the LFK site. And I think that if we put a lot of stuff on there, that it may kind of just jumble things up. And you know, and we may only have 5 or 6 things that we list on at all, period. We don't know. We've got to dive into it. But, you know, there are some classics that we're going to have to really look into, some literature. And, you know, as you read some of this stuff, it does possibly meet that definition. That may have to be listed, but it's not saying we can't use it. It's just that we have to give the parents the opportunity to say, we want something else after we reviewed it.
This is kind of off topic, but kind of on the same topic. With the book challenges and the book conversations we had earlier this year, we had discussion about maybe the libraries at each school posting when they get new books in, whenever that
Yes.
happens. Is that
So,
happening?
so they are posting 30 days before as they get something in, and I know the librarians just met last.
November 8th. They
November
met on
8th.
the PD day, and they worked on updating our challenge policy. Our challenge policy, while it had been reviewed on the schedule, hadn't been rewritten. You know, we have some pretty old forms that we're using and that sort of thing. So in an effort to, you know, modernize our policy and that sort of thing, they worked on a draft of that. So we're working on our challenge policy. Dr. Ballinger had directed that 30 days post of any books that are new to the library be available. With our changeover between websites, I'm not sure if they're posting to new websites or old websites. I'm not
I
sure.
believe they are posting to the new ones.
To the
The new
new-
ones are out to the public,
Okay,
but they are not set to the domain yet. We're still working that out.
so, I mean, this is kind of coming at the same time we're kind of making other changes. But I know that at least one school had said, hey, you know, can you post this? So I do think they're getting them up and running and starting to put those books out there.
Now, all it is all I required was the title and author, and that is all, you know, not a synopsis or, you know, of anything. It's just, here's new titles that are coming, and allow parents to review those before they go on the shelf.
And right now, I think that's everything that's new to the library, right? So it doesn't necessarily meet this.
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah,
no,
it's everything.
I know this,
Yeah.
that's why I said it's not really what we're talking about,
Yeah.
but it is something we
Well-
Yes, ma'am.
had
Yes, ma'am.
an opportunity for.
And as far as the library book challenge that we have had, I meet with actually a parent after Thanksgiving, and then I'll give a report to the board. So we have done one.
All right, thank you.
So-
Look forward to that update. Anything on the first reading? Anything else on the first reading? Thank you both. Next, we're going to talk about the first reading of the 2023-24 school calendar. Mr. Smith.
You should have there in your packet a cover item for our calendar for proposed for next year, along with the proposed calendar. We have a calendar committee that's made up of representatives from all our schools. And that administrative representative as well as a teacher rep. And that's from all our elementaries, both middles, both high, our Blue Ridge Tech, as well as our Diversified Minds. There's also a member from the instructional team that is on this committee. So we've met throughout this fall. The way that we worked our committee, we had our first meeting was with elementary, and then our second meeting that followed right after that was with secondary. And they may say, well, Buck, why did you separate them out? A lot of times when you're in those meetings, sometimes if someone at the elementary level is talking about a particular thing, sometimes someone in the secondary level may look and say, well, that's really not impactful to me, or that's not necessarily how it runs at the high school level, and those type of things. So to avoid some of that overlapping interaction that probably just leads to like a room in darkness, I went ahead and just separated those two groups so that I could hear the needs of elementary as well as secondary. It worked really well. We also had two leads from the committee, one Mr. Kinesh at secondary and Mrs. Lehman of AS Rhodes at the elementary. And a few things I'd like to point out. I'll read down through some of the things that we have here, but some of the things that the group really wanted was at the beginning of the year, this also came from instruction as well, is to have an additional professional day before the first day. Because we have a lot of new people, we have a lot of new things we're implementing, we have all these different laws that come to us that we are implementing, that we're trying to get across. And also at the elementary level, when we have our open house, and I taught at the secondary level, but my wife teaches at the elementary level. And there is a difference, I feel, in the preparation of opening for that open house. Because I perhaps may teach a subject area if I'm at the secondary level. If I've been doing it a while, I've got units developed. Okay, I can get this thing moving fairly quickly. At the elementary level, it's a little bit more holistic. I mean, you've got the bulletin board is just very important. Okay, I found that out. Bulletin board is very important. And all these different types of things. So that to have that extra day and those type of things in there to do that, rather than feeling like that I'm just being pressured within 2 days to get things done before we have that open house. Well, if we were to have one less day there at the beginning, then they're going to need those first couple days to focus on getting things set up for the open house and those type of things. So instruction, Ms. Bragg and her leadership group requested an extra day at the beginning for professional development. So we did add that in there. You're going to also notice, if you look down through August, and you're going to see an early release, okay, an early release. And those early releases, you're going to see that they're spread throughout the year, and they're on a Wednesday, okay? And then you may say, well, why is that? Once again, it really helps elementary. This really came real strong from elementary because at the secondary level, our planning periods are equal to the block of which we teach. And so if that's a 90-minute block period, that's a 90-minute planning period. At the elementary level, it's not that number of that amount of time. So we put in here almost like some catch-up type stuff, almost like to catch your breath and then kind of like regroup with some of your planning. During those time periods, you would not have like division-wide, on those early release days, you would not have like division-wide professional development stuff. It would be more like your team at your school working on stuff for planning. And then you may say, well, why did you put it in there on Wednesday? When we were with the COVID situation, and we had the Wednesdays in the middle of the week where the kids weren't there, we did a virtual type day and stuff. Of course, they really like that as an opportunity, but we just really can't just take that entire day off. But they liked it because the middle of the week, it's kind of like a halftime adjustment. Okay, it's good to have like a halftime to make an adjustment. Well, that's kind of like the halftime during that part of the week to kind of make adjustments. A lot of people had said they would like it on Friday, but I don't want to do an early release on Friday. That means you go home, and somehow you must get out the door. But so that's why it's in there on Wednesday. You're going to look into September, and Dr. Ballinger and I and our all staff, we enjoyed the parent-teacher conferences. To have those in there, we want to be able to continue to do that and have an opportunity there for some the day after with some professional development opportunities. You're going to notice throughout the entire calendar itself, if you look at each month, we try to put in there at least an opportunity for a day or a part of the day or a professional day, just for an opportunity just to kind of catch your breath. Because sometimes we have such a long stretch through there, and when I was in HR, I snow is kind of a sinful word and those type of things when you're around a school because you're not in school. But sometimes it can be good just to have a good old snow day. Everyone just have an opportunity to regroup and those type of things. So we sort of kind of put those in there for planning as well as just for mental health days. And you're going to notice a lot of the holidays and those type of things are very similar to what we have had over the last few years with our calendar. One thing that we did talk about in our group is that probably 2/3 of our community here commute to employment. And most of them find themselves going toward Northern Virginia and those type of things. And so we tried to incorporate or at least keep some holidays of which they would be similar to families. If they were traveling that area, they would have similar to some of those days off. Because, as we talked about, we've talked about with our parent conferences to have family engagement and have people. Well, sometimes you just need to have your own family engagement, and that is where I wanted to coordinate some of those days off that a lot of federal workers may have and those type of things that would coordinate with that, so the families actually would be home at the same day at the same time, and that would be their own personal family engagement. So I felt good about that. You'll see in here that fall breaks. You'll see in here the semester. First semester on this would have 87 days. Second semester would have 90 days. This calendar reflects 1,062 instructional hours. 990 is the requirement that we go by. So that we would bank 72 hours in case of like snow or inclement weather and those type of things. We go roughly for as instructional time that we can count about 6 hours a day. The state requires 5.5, so we're able to bank some of that each day. There's 13 professional days built in. And this is merely the first reading. We'd have 3 readings for this. Our next reading would be on December 7th. And then our final reading would be the first January meeting that we have in 2023.
I just have a question about that November week, the one that's similar to the one we just had this past week, where there's a day off on Tuesday and then Veterans Day is off on Friday instead of doing the Thursday, Friday back to back with school closed. I mean, are you just doing that for kind of the same reason, so the professional day
November
doesn't start a
7th
4-day
would be
weekend?
election day.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay, that's
So with election, we have, now that wouldn't really, I guess, keep us from having class
No,
on
we could-
election
we
day.
could-
But they currently use this room for election. They use Skyline High School and Warren County High School. But I mean, we could still have school on those days.
No, you're right. I was just, when I was looking at the week, just thinking about continuity of going to
It's-
school, like you go on a
it's
Monday
a
and then you're
mess.
off, and then 2 days and then off.
I'm not gonna
No.
disagree with you
I-
at all.
no.
I'm not
It's-
I agree.
I'm not a fan of that week right there, the way it's laid out. It doesn't flow well. We
And it
could,
was
we could go
interesting.
on Veterans Day.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it was
Well, I
interesting
would
at the high school
suggest
having
that.
that
No, I
game
mean, no, there's
in the
not a good
election.
way.
It was like,
I mean, I'm not,
you had people going every which way. When we had that playoff game at Warren County High School, and then you had the voter, they had like a little divided line. You had people
Yeah.
going over here towards the game, and they were redirecting them
It's
over
mass
here.
chaos.
So it was really chaotic.
Yeah.
And that was an evening activity, so.
No.
I
But yeah.
work the election day, like, please
Yeah.
do not bring
No.
children here on election day, please.
Right.
But yeah, that is a tough week. I mean,
Yeah,
That's
no,
not ideal,
no,
but-
that's why, that's not what it's supposed to be.
Have we polled the parents at all as far as the earlier starts? And I, as the homeschooler, I am not gonna object to whatever calendar you guys want whatsoever, but I know I did get several angry messages from parents saying, you know, why do we keep starting earlier and earlier and earlier? Have we asked, have we taken like a vote from the parents on this?
This is the first calendar that I put together for the division, so I have not for this one. I can't speak on previous calendars.
as far as you mean with the start date, like early in August?
Yeah.
I know they were moving when I first came in,
I was
that
gonna
it
say,
was, it was gonna be an early,
making.
it was gonna be an early start, but my first year here, we had to move it to after Labor Day, just simply because that was the first pandemic year.
Right.
And we had to prepare, so we've been trying to get back, and we've had to take 2 weeks here, 2 weeks here to get back to where, you know, I felt the calendar was before I came here.
And one thing too with that early start is that we used to go into first semester into the second half of the year. So we didn't finish first semester until sometime in January. And then, but we would take off the time for the winter break and those type of things. It was just really hard.
It is hard
Because
to line up.
the earlier
Yeah.
we start, the more likely we are to be able to have a true semester of stopping it at the winter break. The farther down we go, the more it shifts it on this end.
Yeah.
That was
And it's
one of
tough.
the dilemmas.
And it is tough having those students come back in after,
It's really difficult.
after that winter break to take an SOL 2 weeks, 2 weeks later. I mean, here they've had 2 weeks off and now they've got to pass an SOL. It's just, it's
I feel
challenging.
like it was transitioning, and then the pandemic hit, which set everybody back, and then it kind of just jumped into it last year, and then, because you got to start somewhere, and then, because I think this was like if you look back 4 to 5 years, it's been transitioning to that, and then it just kind of like, oh, it's here, there's normalcy, we can start, you know, I think everybody's gonna be happy come May, you know, the end of May, when they're like, woohoo, we're done by May, hopefully, no snow days, a lot, or not a lot, but yeah, I think it's just been a progression, and then the pandemic set everybody back. But I know it's kind of weird to see like, gosh, that end of July starting, but if you look at it from a year's perspective, I mean,
No, I mean, it makes sense. to
by June,
finish
you're done.
One before winter
So.
break, yeah.
So with the built-in extra hours, if we don't use any snow days, does the year back up even more? We're going until the end of, to
Yeah,
that part
that's-
of May, no
that's-
matter what. We just
Yeah,
did
we
extra.
Because contractually and those type of things, we'd be looking at number of days rather than the number of hours.
Well, and the thing, it really hurts because you wouldn't want to, if you don't use those snow days and here you are in April, teachers have already planned out that here's my SOL remediation this week, SOLs are set on this week. Well, now you take that back, you're gonna throw them in all kinds of chaos. But I have some ideas for a future calendar that we could look at, that would allow the exact thing that you're actually talking about, Dr. Benz.
Mr. Smith, how does this calendar, or is it even coordinated with other school districts in this region? I'm thinking because of fall sports.
Typically, we wouldn't do
Typically, we do
that.
not. I did not coordinate with other school
I
divisions
just wonder, what
on.
if a school in this area was starting after Labor Day? I guess their football schedule would start before school started.
It does.
Yeah.
It
does.
It does.
Prior to when we started after Labor Day, we would play
Couple of games.
we played a couple games
Yeah.
before,
Okay,
and the crowds were still big.
Yeah. I was just,
Yeah.
The only other thing that I was gonna ask about was, with the back to school night, I know I had heard from a couple teachers that they wanted to make sure that they could attend back to school night as well, so maybe if that's something we can keep in mind.
Definitely. In our committee, that was one of the things that we looked at, and this is kind of like, the next level of looking, this kind of getting into the weeds on this. But like, Ms. Ellis was mentioning, like, because it's the same schedule, an elementary teacher may not be able to get to another school, more or less a secondary school or those type of things. So we may look at doing something staggered wise where maybe we can be able to do that. But that did come up in the committee as well as a concern, because we ran into that this past parent-teacher conference numerous times. And this calendar is that it's not just vetted by this particular group, that the representatives then go back to their schools and they share this and they gather information. And then we had additional meetings to hear what they thought would be nice to have changed or they liked about it and those type of things. We re-met, we refined this calendar. So this calendar itself has been through several vettings, and that now it's just coming to you for 3 readings.
And then we also had the superintendent's advisory look at it. They made a couple of suggestions that I think Mr. Smith took back to his committee. So it's going through a lot of people. A lot of eyes are being laid on it.
Okay, next up, we have discussion of the 2023 school board meeting dates and times.
All right, so I'm gonna ask Rob to come up here too, because we're gonna cover a couple of items, and Tim's here. So one, I want to look at the school board meeting calendar. That is this one. And then we're going to talk about the budget calendar. And that's why, so I've got Rob here and Tim here so we can talk about these. So when looking at the school board meeting calendar, I want to draw your attention to the April 5th date. That is this year, April 5th. I've provided you with this year's calendar, and if you look, April 5th is a holiday, that is spring break. Those are typically times that the schools are closed. So my suggestion would be that we do it, have our regular meeting on the 29th of March.
isn't that also a holiday?
No, if you look back at that, well, you're on the next year. Look at this year's current calendar. So I provided you with both of them because we run into 2 different school calendars. So you have to look at the 22, 23.
I see it.
Yeah. So when Rob and I was kind of looking at this from the budget perspective, he mentioned, well, there's actually 5 weeks in March. So that would keep us on that schedule of 1 every other week. And that we could do that meeting. Do you think that would have any bearing on payroll or on any bills that are due, Rob, or anything of that nature? Because
It
most of
should,
those are
yeah.
brought in at that time, right? So if you want to look at that one,
And we adopted this calendar at our first January meeting
right.
in 2023, but we just wanted to talk about it beforehand so we kind of know.
So you guys can give me some feedback on what you want to do, because there's also another suggestion that I'd like to do. Is, as you notice, we have our regular meetings and our work sessions. One of the things I would like to propose, and this, Ms. Salins, this falls into what you were talking about with the legislative, instead of doing this at a work session, we maybe use 1 Wednesday out of each quarter as a retreat. And that way we come together as a board, we discuss these things, we look at these things that we need to look at. It's in a different setting and we're having different conversations. So that it's more of we focus on what we need to do as a board, instead of having that. Because we have in place an alternative, so if we need to hire somebody, we already have in place the agreement where Mr. Goodwin can ask me to ask Dr. Pence to go ahead and get somebody started. Also, we have the process in place to where if we have bills that we have to pay, those bills can be paid and then brought to the board at the next meeting. So that way Rob could sign off on those, still pay those things, and then, so it's not that we're slowing anything down. So we have some processes in place that would allow us as a board to do that, if that's something that you would like to do.
Well, I mean, that was a good example, like right off when you said to talk about the legislative things, that would be better,
Yes, yeah,
like,
that is true.
probably for the February work session, because you said that's coming up like March and April, right? When you have to give
When
the
you need
positions.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a good example right there of something
Yeah.
that would be a longer discussion and wouldn't want to have a bunch of other work session
Right, and
topics.
my staff wouldn't have to come to that meeting. You know, it's just us working on what we need to work on.
Mhm.
So if that's something that the board collectively would like for us to look at, maybe working in every quarter a board retreat.
I
then we
like
can
the
do-
retreats, I know, I've been to a couple of them with you, and they're, it's a fluid meeting, and I enjoyed the retreats.
Okay. So we'll look at that. So-
What
It
time?
would
Be in
Take a
the
note on this?
evenings, right?
Okay.
Would they still be in the evenings though, or would they be
Or
during?
maybe it wouldn't even have to be on like that date.
No, it
would
wouldn't
just
even
take
have to
the
be that
place
day.
of that.
We could totally do a
Okay.
different date
Like
if you
I
wanted
said.
to, a
Okay.
different day and time if you wanted to,
Okay.
for that. We just wouldn't have a work session that night, or that month.
I got you.
It would just be, now the downside to that is if we had something that we needed to present at the next meeting, you wouldn't have that opportunity to hear it at a work session before a meeting. So, we're trying to work through that process of bringing more things to the work session before we bring them to the regular meeting. So that's, the downside to that is that, if we're there to work on legislative directives that we want as a school system, as a school board, we're not probably gonna be talking about, I'm not gonna be sitting there presenting all the stuff to you that night. We're there for a specific purpose to really hone in on
Well, I think we could work through it, and
Your work in progress, if
Yeah.
it's
Give it a
something that's a
try.
problem.
and if we we can always change it if it's not
Yeah.
working for us, but I think it's definitely open to give it a try.
that. Okay, so is there, when we look at that quarterly, is there a different day? And the times, are the times fine with the meetings that we currently have with work sessions and or the days? Because the Wednesdays don't necessarily have to be set in stone. I mean, we need a monthly night that we want to have a regular meeting. But as long as the government center is open that night, you could possibly change it to a Monday night or a Tuesday night, or depending upon what night or the week may be open. I don't know which ones are open.
In the past, there's been contention, Monday and Tuesday night, Town Council Board of Supervisors. Wednesday, the planning commissions meet, that's why we're here tonight instead of down at the government center. Thursdays was the school board night up until about 5 years ago. And at that time, every Thursday night was open, so the school board could any Thursday night of the month
We could
meet in the big
anywhere.
room.
We could meet here, we could meet at one of the high schools if we wanted to. I don't know, I'm fine with it how it is,
Hard
but.
time Changing because I'm committed at least for the rest of this school year to nights that I teach, nights that I work, and I have things. I've based everything around this Wednesday for until the end of the school year. I will have to find people to teach classes for me if I switch this, so.
And that was just to bring this up for you guys to
Sure.
discuss.
I wouldn't
So
mind it not being at 5 though.
Well,
If
so
we
that
could
was
work at
gonna-
6, I wouldn't have to leave work early on
The time was more my thing, and even the 7 o'clock one. I like that we have started to have the executive session, if we need one, at 6 on our regular meeting night.
Too.
But could we just move our regular meeting to 6 on those nights
And then
instead of
flip it to the-
7?
And then put the,
If we need one, because we don't always do an executive session.
Well, we've been bringing the discipline report.
Right, right.
During
And I
the
agree with
school
the
year,
5 o'clock too, as we have action items at the work session, I think that certainly presents a problem for people if they are getting off work at 5 to
we
try to get here.
sometimes see people come in late.
Yeah,
Well,
they're
I would
late.
like to have time to go
Um,
home.
So I thought maybe in the
beforehand.
5:30 or 6
Yeah, it
range
sounds
for a work session, if we needed an executive session for us, I could slide it in
What's
front.
that?
You come right from work here?
Yeah, I have to leave work early to get here. I mean, I work till 5, so. It's, I
Yeah,
can do
I'm-
that. It's not a huge deal, but like
I'm-
if it were 6, then it would be better for me.
6 is fine, that's fine for me. The only thing I will have an issue with, if we do work sessions, or I'm sorry, closed session before 5:30, I can't bring my children into a closed
So we
session,
would do
and
it
my
after.
husband can't get them before
Well,
5:30, so.
And
5:30 is what's.
even if we need to do, I try to keep closed sessions off of Wednesdays, off of our work session nights. Only if we have to have one, will I present that? But we could, and it would have to just be after.
Yeah.
No, I
like-
don't
like
want you guys
tonight.
rushing from work, so.
But like,
if
were
I-
you
I'm sure
talking
you
like
guys
maybe-
want a snack.
Change the work sessions to like 5:30 instead of 5?
I mean, 5:30 might allow, would that allow
Would that be,
people that
Is that
work
enough?
until 5?
Is that
Or
enough for
6,
you, or is 6 better
or
for
do
you?
there 6? I don't know.
5:30 is fine, because I already
Okay.
checked my schedule to work at a different location on Wednesdays, so, yeah, I mean,
And then do we like
I'm
7
wide
on the
open.
main meeting, or do we pull that sooner to 6?
I mean, the only thing I could see with moving it sooner is if, I do like doing the closed before the meeting, so if we started,
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to do a 5:30 closed session, 6:30 start time? That's still moving it up a little bit. That still gives you an hour before.
or we could do like the summer ones, maybe it earlier, because we might, well, I guess we don't really know if we'll have an executive session on
Oh,
those. We might not. But yeah, if we do them all at 5:30, that's fine with me, or whatever.
we don't have to decide today, but if everybody wants to kind of think about it.
The nice thing like about if we did do 5:30 work sessions and then 6 regular meetings with or 6:30 and 5:30, would just be kind of that consistency, nice and like our brains like 5:30 every meeting.
All of them are 5:30?
Not that that's a big deal and that we don't have to, that's an easy switch, but
no, I do, that would be
that would
easier
be kind of nice to
remember.
know, like
Yeah.
whether we're going to a work
Always have to
session
be there at
or a regular
5:30.
meeting,
always
we'd
have to
be
be
there
there
at
at
5:30.
Yeah,
Anything to make it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm completely flexible on that.
I think the 7 o'clock meeting ends up being a little bit late for people sometimes. And then I think the 5 o'clock is too early.
Too
sometimes
early,
For people to get here for
Yeah.
work, so.
6:30 might be good though.
yeah.
So what are you wanting us, because we won't have another work session before you're supposed to adopt this at the January meeting. What would you like for us to kind of,
Well, we're saying our regular meeting time on the first Wednesdays would be at 6:30,
okay,
and then our work session time would be at 5:30. But
but
we as a board would
executive
be
session
5:30.
on that first one will be at 5:30.
So
And yes, to
5:30
move
start
into
time for
And
March
yes.
29th, and yes to one retreat of order, with
Yeah.
February being our first one.
Yes. And then the other one that I had a question about is the July 5th one.
I was wondering
Yes.
the same.
That doesn't feel like a good
Yeah,
time
right
to
after
have
4th of
that.
July.
And that's what I was, yes.
Yeah, so that, did you have a proposal, like, were you just thinking about moving it to the next one, July 12th? Or does that make it too late?
So that would be looking at the 23 calendar.
Well, yeah, because we don't have a work session in July.
No, we don't
so
have one,
I
so
feel like
it's-
that's not a big deal. and it's a problem.
Yeah, because you don't have one in July, so you could move that to that next, possibly we'd have to look to see if, or, as Mr. Valentine just said, Thursday is typically open. We could check to see if Thursday the 6th is open, if that's something you want to do, or,
I work on, I
Okay.
have to find somebody to take.
or we just move it to the 12th of July if you guys want.
I
The
would-
thing is, typically, with the last 2 years, you're having a special meeting at the end of July to approve a budget anyway. So, I think we wound up having 3 meetings this last July. So, you know.
Let's hope not this year.
let's-
So let's just go ahead and schedule one for the 12th.
So we can put that on the 12th. We'd have to check and make sure that
Our budget calendar ends in May.
uh,
Our budget calendar ends in May.
well, it's
so
supposed to.
We'll be
yes.
fine.
So you need to check to see if the room would be available on the 12th, but we could definitely do the 12th. If that's what,
I mean, I
you
think,
guys are
I
wanting to
think
do.
I just don't feel like anybody's gonna really be prepared, because the schools are gonna be closed the day before.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Friends
it
and
doesn't make
fireworks.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the 12th would be good.
We still have Tuesday, November 14th. That is if we go into, if anybody's gonna go to VSBA. So if anybody's gonna go to that conference, we're gonna leave that to, like we're having tonight on a Tuesday night.
I mean, it could potentially be several new board members then, and I know when Mr. Rinaldi and I came on, we went to the conference that.
Yeah, well, it won't be for this month, not this November.
No, we
Well,
went-
I guess
we
it
went
could,
before
yes,
we
it
were
could,
seated.
yes, it could, the 23rd, you're right, Dr. Finch, you are
Right
correct.
after.
Yes,
So
it
I'd
could
kind
be.
of, I would hate to speak for them, for potential new board members, and move it off of Tuesday.
I was just saying, the new board members wouldn't be sworn in yet, though, so it wouldn't affect.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
we
always-
went.
they've always
We
taken
went.
it down
We
there.
could go, but I'm saying like, for the
Oh, I
meeting
see.
date.
I see, like to go.
Right.
Right, I see.
Yeah, they could go, they're not required to be at the meeting,
Right,
but they could go, you guys are required to be at the meeting.
Right, I gotcha. But, I mean, right, but after I went to the meeting.
So do we want to leave that on Tuesday in case any of the current board members?
Yeah, I think
And
Want
I
to-
might go if I, yeah, I might go if I can.
I know, 'cause
Out of
I
town
did-
this week.
I'd like to.
That would depend on the July vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just leave it.
Okay, so just leave that. All right, so you got all the changes to this calendar right here, right? Okay. So the next calendar I kind of just wanted to let you look over is a really rough draft on the budget calendar. So tonight you can see that we're I'm having a budget committee meeting after this one. I have a couple of times where we're just gonna follow our work session and have a meeting following that, whenever we can. The only joint budget between the Warren County Public Schools Budget Committee and the Board of Supervisors Budget Committee, the only one we have scheduled right now is December 5th. The others, we would have to put those in as their plan. You know, what I feel for my budget committee, I would like to meet with them at least twice a month. To go over where we're at, what we're doing. Looking through, like right now for December. So we start tomorrow with our cost centers coming in. So we have the 16th and 17th, cost centers are coming in. Also the 29th and 30th, or 28th and 29th, the 2 days after Thanksgiving, the rest of the cost centers are coming in. So that first budget committee meeting on December 1st will be an opportunity for me to sit down with the budget committee and say, here's the asks. This is what our cost centers are telling us, this is what they're sending us. And then as we put all that together, now it won't be put together in a nice form that Rob always puts together, because that takes a while to get it all gelled together, but at least that'll be our first conversation of, here's what cost centers are telling us their needs are. Let's start looking at this, so that'd be the first look. Then we have our joint session. Then we, just before Christmas break or winter break, we start going into, again, usually around that time, don't we get the governor's budget around the 15th or so?
Yeah,
Yeah, 15th, the 18th, it's usually that Thursday or Friday.
So, you know, we're hoping that we would have the governor's budget. That would be our first look at what we're getting from the state at that point in time. So that's why those two are set right there. The only ones I have concerns about, looking at what the proposed calendar for the Board of Supervisors, I did provide that to you guys as well. When you look at, I believe it was a public hearing on the 23-24 budget is April 11th. Now, that is a date that we need to remember. April 11th is their public hearing, so they have to have our budget. Also, you can see that they have a tentative date for March 9th as a joint session. Now, that is, you know, if this board wants to, you know, you guys want to work something out, or if that date is good with everybody, you know, we do have, let me get my other calendar out. You know, is that something that we want to adjust one of ours, because we have the March 1st and the March 15th, so that's the week in between those two. So typically what I try to do is have the superintendent's proposed budget. I would need to have that to you by March 1st. Because we need to have that in order to talk with the Board of Supervisors if we're still staying on the March 9th deadline.
Will you be able to make that one? It's a Thursday.
So are these
This is what the-
all of us?
The
Not
Board of
just
Supervisors scheduled this, yes.
Not just the.
Right, not just
not
us.
just you
It's all
guys.
the- all both boards.
Yeah.
I mean, I can. Do we know when the Board of Supervisors are meeting to discuss their tax rate? Do we know where this falls in here? Because
No.
obviously the assessments were up like, what, 60 cents? They were up a huge amount.
I did give everybody this. So this is their, and it may be a separate sheet, yes ma'am.
It's separate.
There's a separate one.
There's a separate one. Do you have it?
This one here.
Ah, yeah, I got it here.
And that is their tentative schedule.
All right, I've got a question. On December the 5th, joint Warren County Public Schools / BOS budget meeting, is that budget committee meeting?
That is
Yeah, that's our
budget
subcommittee.
So the December 5th one is not.
Not all of us, it's just
No,
budget.
that is the budget
That's
subcommittee. Yeah, and I should put
March
committee
9th
on there.
Where are we meeting there? Do you know where that one is? Do you know where that one is?
I think it's our turn to meet at our place, isn't it? But we met upstairs last.
Yeah, I think you're right.
There was another one down there.
March 9th is the one that's us, but that's us. That's
All of
everybody.
it, everybody?
So the ones that are the whole board for this board, so I'll work with the budget subcommittee throughout the process. Then where you see February 15th, that is the entire school board. That is all of you talking budget.
And we're gonna change the time now, right?
Yes, so I'll have to go in and change those times. And then again, you see on March 15th.
Well, on March 9th.
Yeah, well, yes, that's a work session. So that work session there is joint boards
That's a Thursday.
March
That's the one the
Should we ask
supervisors
them
scheduled.
if we can do
and
Wednesday?
March 1st, yes.
I mean, it doesn't matter to me, but we, you want to ask them if we can do the Wednesday, then the 8th instead of the 9th?
I mean, I don't need to rock your boat with, like, one day isn't bad. Maybe we were talking about changing our actual meeting dates, that probably, but.
Right.
So, March 15th,
That's our regular meeting.
yeah, but which did he say?
So the difference on here is where you see
Yeah,
committee,
okay.
where you see WCPS Budget Committee, that is the subcommittee. Where
Right,
you see WCPS School Board, that is the entire board talking
Okay.
about the budget.
okay.
Mhm.
That
seems a lot more organized than year one.
Do we know when we would, in a typical year, get the budgets from the General Assembly?
So we typically get from the governor's budget
So the governor.
in December, and then however long the legislative process takes, you know, they're typically supposed to have it.
This is a short
It's a short
session
one.
this year,
This is the second
so
year,
it
right?
should be, yeah, it should be sometime in the latter part of February. I have to look at their schedule, but
Okay. But not long before March 1st, when we're trying to get
Yeah, and it may not be ready by March 1st.
the, right.
So we would just, basically on that proposed budget, I would have to sit there and say, okay, am I going to look at just using the governor's budget? And then the issue with that is when we have the meeting with the Board of Supervisors, and we're using the governor's budget, but then the General Assembly comes out, and then the crossover happens, and if we get an increase, then we have to redo the budget with the additional dollars that we would have received. Or negative, if it's negative. We don't want to talk that way, but, you know, we would have to adjust our budget, and then we would have to approve one before they have their hearing, because they have to have our budget for their hearing.
And you said the Board of Supervisors hearing is April 11th?
Yes, theirs is April 11th, and then their goal is to approve the proposed budget on April 18th. So, but of course, calendars,
The whole system is
It's
just a
all kinda at
convoluted
the-
mess. It's just, and it's no one's here's fault. It's just
I'm
the
not
whole-
disagreeing with you at all.
General
Sometimes
Assembly.
big government.
And as you can see, I didn't put any dates in April for the committee, because that's just, I don't know what's gonna happen, where we're gonna be.
Mhm.
I just put that May 3rd, we would approve our final budget.
I mean, we may not even know when they've called the March 9th meeting, we may not really even know everything as our board.
We may not. But I can change these, I'll change these times to reflect what we talked about tonight, except for the ones that are outside of when we're having school board meetings. Is the committee still fine with 4:30, or do you want to move that to a different time?
That works with me.
Because we've been doing 4:30 or 4:15, I know that one's at 4:15.
That's fine.
Okay,
I mean,
Yeah, I checked all those dates.
Anything else?
okay,
These are the same as what you had emailed, right?
yes,
Yeah,
okay.
yes, yes, I didn't change anything from the ones that I shared with you.
Yeah. that's fine.
Okay.
So, all right, so what we'll do is now, this budget calendar, we will have it to approve at the next meeting. So that it's kind of, this is what we're gonna do, and in case we need to change something.
But our main meeting calendar will be the January.
In January, yes.
and then the budget calendar, we'll have that up on the
Yes, we'll put it on the
website
website.
so that people can refer to it or with all of our budget information.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh. Okay, well, we changed the February, you said this already probably, but the February 15th, we changed to a retreat. We're
Okay.
talking about changing to a retreat. You have that on this budget calendar.
So, and that is something we could do at the retreat. So February 15th. You know, and we could do that at the retreat, that's when we can dive in and talk about other things, and, you know, we could cover legislative stuff, we could cover budget stuff, those could be the two things that we discuss that night at a retreat.
Okay.
And are you guys fine with me just looking at a quarter day or month for the retreat, then share that with the board chair?
I mean, I think it makes more sense for you to look at it because you guys can all work together with how it falls on what you'll need potentially to bring before the board during those work sessions versus would it be okay for a retreat?
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. have substitute employee update and discussion, Mr. Goodwin.
Sure. Speaking of a retreat, I'd love to take you to the oasis that I like to call substitute teachers, so provisions. So I'll do my best to be very concise in my comments and my update today. I'm getting the look, so. Thank you, Dr. Ballinger, for passing that out for me. The board has asked a number of times for just updates on our substitute provisions, fill rates, and also our contract with ESS. I've received a number of questions throughout my time serving as a Human Resources Director just about how are we doing in terms of our contract with the ESS and also with our fill rate. So what you have in front of you tonight, Mr. Grant's also kind enough, thank you, to put it up here on the board for the public and also for the media that's here tonight. I want to just kind of walk you across this sheet in terms of data. Obviously, green means a good thing. Red means something that, you know, is sort of a concern for me. Yellow, which there are very few of here, are kind of like neutral. So on the left-hand side, the first two columns, first of all, this is basically a comparison from July to November the 11th. The first two columns, the 21, 22 columns there are our fill rates. If you will look next to each one of the schools, there's a fill rate for 2021 and then a fill rate for 2022. Remember, this is the period from the beginning of school until right now. So we have a couple of outliers that are there service-wise, but by and large, our fill rate is a little bit better this year than it was last year with ESS. The second column is actually the number of absences, people who are in need of a position to be filled at each one of our schools. So if you look there, we have more absences in 2022 than we did in 2021. We thought that we would have fewer absences this year with COVID and the pandemic being in a different place than it has been in the past 2 years, but in fact, we have more folks who are missing days. So the increase in absences means you have to have more substitutes to cover those positions. You can see there's a lot of red there in the column this year when you look at the number of absences and compare those. And then the third column there is basically how many of those absences were filled, the quantity, not the percentage. So by and large, we have more filled positions this year than we did last year with ESS, with the exception of a couple of different places there, again, two outliers. The last graph at the bottom talks about fills by date range, and it really does talk about just the total. So it's not just by school, it's just by the numbers. So the fill rate this year, when you look at so far this period of time from, again, the beginning, July 1 to November the 11th, for this year, 2022, it's 63%. The same time last year was 58%, so that's up 5%. The total number of absences that were there, 3467 this year, last year 2889. The filled number is up 2197 this year for the time period versus 1663. And then unfilled positions, which I know is always something we need to talk about. Last year, it was 1,226. This year, it is 1,270. So there's a few less positions that weren't filled this year than last year. There were 41 substitutes that have been hired by ESS, or there have been since the beginning of this year to today. I will remind the board that we continue to hire a number of those employees on as full-time staff once they're with us. We have a number of people serving in long-term positions. We have some folks who joined us as substitutes on a daily basis that we'd hired for instructional assistants. And then some we've hired as teachers as they've earned their credentials and a bachelor's degree and things like that. I wanted to come before you tonight, first of all, to answer any questions about the data. I probably didn't do it justice, but I know that the meeting's been long. So I will be glad to go by school for you, Mr. Rinaldi, if you'd like, each school by each number. No, I'm kidding.
Whatever you want to do, Mr. Goodwin, it's fine with me.
I'm just kidding. Does anyone have any questions about the data that's provided in the sheet? If not, okay, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, your two outliers, central office and the board office. Is that what you're talking about? Like,
Under which one of the
under
columns?
at the top, where your schools are listed?
Yes, that's correct.
Central office, so what's the
Especially the one
difference?
that's the special services office.
Well, I'm talking about like, it's central office and then Warren County School Board office, like, you don't get subs for people from them.
Well, we do get substitutes for the Warren County School Board office if it's the front desk. That's something that we had in place, but only the person who greets you when you walk
It's
inside.
Only that position.
And that's pretty rare. We've really tried to,
That's what I was
Dr. Ballinger's provided a rotation schedule so that when someone's out, that front office is covered, but on occasion, someone's ill or things like that. So, yeah, I hope that
Because
answered
that
that
is the
question.
main line where calls do come in if they're not calling the school
Right,
specifically.
so you wanna always have
So,
that.
so we do have to have somebody there to at least pick up the phone.
And then what would the special services office, like, what kind of positions would that entail?
Special Services Office, that I think, I would have to look and see specifically, and I'd be glad to do that and provide you with that information. That may have been a long-term person who was here in one of the therapist positions that we had to fill through like a teacher role with them.
Yeah, because you wouldn't typically.
There's
go
no
when the
position in this-
Therapist is out, they're just out that day, they make up the time.
It requires too much expertise.
Yes,
So
right, that's
that
right.
position would have been either someone at one of the front desks, if it had to be covered, but that's not likely. So I'll look that up and specifically give that to you.
So what do you do when, and I'm looking at the spell rates here, even though they're in the grades, they've gotten better. A lot of these, like Skyline High School, Skyline Middle School, and Warren County Middle School, they've only got like a 50% fill rate. What do you do when you've got no entity that is set those classes?
You pull an instructional assistant if need be. At the secondary level, folks teach 3 blocks and they have 1 planning block. And then oftentimes those folks will have to rotate and cover that block. You all did approve last year for us to have the instructional coverage compensation where it's a certain minimal dollar amount for that one. That's a unusual coverage. It's not a regular coverage. We have a different rate for that, and I know you all support teachers receiving their pay for that. But the other one, when it's a substitute, we do that in-house and people shuffle around. But you're right, some of those numbers, even though I've stated that they're better, there are some that are in the 50s. So that means that only 50% of those positions were able to be filled on that particular day. And again, it's an average over a period of time, this period of time.
Can we get ESS feedback, have they given us feedback, like why they're struggling to fill those positions? Or can we give them feedback of, speaking for myself, I'm not thrilled with when I see your job being half completed. Is there any way, we expect you to step this up?
Yes, that, we've talked to them about that. They have people in the division every single week working to recruit and to train and to hire and bring people in. It's a challenge. The region is kind of displaying very similar fill rates. They aren't a lot better around, and people are solving their empty spots in the same way we are, shuffling people around, offering instructional compensation. I'm not aware of anyone in Region 4 that doesn't offer that opportunity for people that have to cover those blocks, at least in Virginia, in our region. Yes, I do have those conversations on a regular basis, and we want them to be 100%, but it's not going to be that.
Do you happen to know if there's ever been a situation or occurrence where we've just had to cancel a class?
I'm not aware of that ever
you know,
happening.
Due to non-coverage, or anything like that?
The only situation I'm aware of that was not that, but it would be something that I would consider unusual, is it was one of the high schools. I think they had 2 individuals for the same course who were not there that day, so they combined the classes, I want to say in the library. I think I'd only know of that happening one time. And I'm not remembering the specifics about that, but they had to be creative, and that's what they did. They made sure there was a licensed, certified person teaching the material, but was a combined group in a larger room. I come before you tonight for a couple of reasons. I want to ask you for some direction. I know that over time, probably a couple of months ago, you all asked for some additional information. So what I'd like to ask the board to do tonight is just help me by giving me some direction on which direction you would like for me to go. I have taken the opportunity by phone to talk with colleagues in Clark County, Frederick County, and Winchester schools, which we work very closely with. Each one of them have stated to me that they're glad to have me come and talk with them about what it costs to do a program, because we are the only one of the four of us that do have a provider with ESS. And our school division, as I mentioned before, has had a provider for quite some time now. Some of those divisions are envious that we have a provider, and some of those folks think they do a pretty good job of doing it themselves. And so I think we'll find a variety of things. I have some questions I've developed. We can continue with ESS. I did ask principals for feedback recently. When we look at this data, I shared this data at the last principals meeting that we had that Dr. Ballinger led here, I think, about a week and a half ago. I had this data then, I shared it with them on that day. Some of the comments they provided were things have kind of evened out. They're able to provide the feedback to ESS. They're getting the calls back that they need. They brought up some of the same questions Ms. Salins has brought up tonight about, hey, this is better, but we still have some positions that aren't being filled. What can we do about that? Because our folks are covering that. I said to the group of principals, first of all, thank you for what you do, because some of them too have to cover classes on occasion. That's what happens when you run a school, is you have to do whatever is required. Everybody's on board with making sure students learn. But I also know that the folks we're paying additional compensation to, in one way or the other, will get fatigued. It's a very long day when you don't have an opportunity to plan and you don't have an opportunity to grade papers and do the things during the day in that time, which means your day gets extended. So our goal is to make sure that we absolutely have the most people and the best people in front of our students on a daily basis, as we stated to you before. So I'd be glad to explore options if the board would like to do that, and I can mention some of those that I have as ideas now, or I could be very happy with staying with ESS, and the relationship that we've built with them, I think, is continuing to grow, and I feel like our data is better than it's been in the past, and I know we have room to grow. So at the direction of the board, I serve at your pleasure, and I'm glad to do whichever of those things you'd like to do.
And the goal for this, if you want us to look at doing an RFP and to evaluate what it would be to do an in-house program, the goal would be to offer this at the January work session, because whatever direction you decide to go as a board, we have to build that in the budget. So the earlier we can get this going, and so if you can give us direction tonight on, we want you to do this or this, then we can start that process to have that information ready for January, because the longer we kick the can down the road, the longer it's gonna be for us, harder it is gonna be for us to put that into the budget, because we just don't know the answers.
So you haven't actually met with Clark or Winchester yet?
Because of the tight time frame
Sure.
that we've had recently and a number of things that we've been working on, I haven't had the opportunity to visit with each one of them as I'd like to, and I think that I need to provide you with really great factual information and numbers.
Well,
So sorry, I was gonna say Winchester City, I mean, their student population is more comparable to ours as far as.
I actually have those numbers,
They're
if it's okay if I provide
Yeah,
those
I
to
mean,
you.
they're just under, a little over 4,000, we have,
When-
5,000 in Frederick. Frederick County, I don't know that, do you wanna compare apple to apples? As far as I think our student population, because they're serving the same amount of kids that we are approximately, so.
Well, it's the number of absences that I feel like you have to compare too. Like, do we have
You
excessive
can look at the percentages of absences, even though they're larger, their percentage may be the same as ours, or even higher.
I would like to see Shenandoah on this list of.
I can contact them as well if that's someone you'd like to have included.
Yes.
Who did you support?
Shenandoah.
Clark's so small.
So here, there's a number of ways to compare things and just in my mind. When you look at Winchester Public Schools, they have about 337 licensed teachers that they cover. These are approximate numbers, with about 4,300 students. If you look at Clark County, they are smaller, 133 teachers and about 1,800 students. And then we have 13,000 students in Frederick County with around 1,000 teachers. To me, those are three different levels, but they're also three different people in our region. What we're really looking for is, how do you find people here? I don't want to compare us to, Wise County, or I don't want to go down somewhere to a place that's not in our region. So I'm trying to do that. Shenandoah County, great. we compete with Shenandoah County a lot for substitutes because people live on both one side of the mountain or the other, and that's where they go. And so we also have substitutes who drive all the way here from West Virginia. I mean, so there are people in the region that we're working with. I think what you'll find if we, glad to add Shenandoah, I'll do whatever you ask. I think we have great partners there. You know, we have a, Ms. Shepherd, who was here before as a superintendent, very collaborative, likes to work together, and I do know the folks that are there in their human resources department. But I don't want, I mean, I'd be happy to take one of these off of the list, or if you think more. I was looking at it not from a equal standpoint, but from a learning standpoint. If folks have been doing this, Frederick County is a bigger machine, but they also have been doing it for a while and know what's required in the engine. You know, so they're a little bit bigger, which I can learn from someone who's bigger. I like to stretch a little bit. But I could also learn from someone who's smaller, who might do it with a really personal touch because they're small. So I wanted to combine those elements so that we try to take pride in ourselves to welcome people and keep people, which I think a smaller division can do, but a larger division can figure out the process and what's required from a people standpoint and a dollars and cents standpoint. So I'll be glad to exclude anyone or include anyone in the look, but I just want to tell you my thinking.
Can we poll the subs as well? Like, can we poll our subs that are working from ESS and find out about their satisfaction?
They do that. That's complicated. It's a little complicated because they're not my employee, you know, so I will be glad to ask how to do that and work with you to do it. Yeah, I'd love to talk with you more about how you'd like to, maybe I can give the questions you'd like and see if they can do that for me.
I'm just curious about their general satisfaction, because I know obviously there have been subs that have come forward who
Sure.
have run with it. And there's always that hesitancy with them, with wanting to respond to, you know, their behavior with ESS.
Yes.
But I think just a lot of times talking to people is just to get a sense of what's going on. Whether they like it or not, whether they would prefer us explore other options and apps and this and that.
I think the last time that ESS polled their employees, that I'm aware of, was June. So I'm not sure what we could glean from that June survey, but we could, I'd be glad to ask for anything that you'd
Still,
like.
though, that's ESS polling them. So
Yeah.
It's a little different.
I have to be careful about all how that works. Yeah.
I know we've got a great sense of feedback recently,
Sure, I'm aware of that, yes. Thank you for that.
concerns, but.
Yeah. Definitely want to work with you, but we are grateful for the substitutes that we have that work for us through ESS. They do an amazing job. And as a former principal here in this division myself, I can tell you that when they walk in a building, they're a part of your team, just like a person that works for Warren County Public Schools on paper. I mean, they're a part of the family. You know, when they come in the building, kids know them, parents trust them. We know who they are, we ask for them, and they want to come back to the same school. So definitely want to make sure that we put that in mind as we take care of them and just build a really strong process. I think, so to me, I see, if you want to give me the direction, one is we would stay with ESS and you just say, just keep going. Another one would be, would you take a look at that? And then I think that process could include, what would it look like with ESS if you want to have them present or give information or me get information. We could look at the process with these either 4 or fewer counties that you all have mentioned and I've mentioned tonight, including Shenandoah. And then one might be, could I bring in another outside provider to just give us a different look than ESS for you? I'm aware of one other that has approached me that's near the region that does a lot of work that would give us kind of a comparison if we didn't continue to do it to ourselves. These two could be compared and then balance that against, hey, could we do this ourselves? Yes.
Is there anything in our arrangement with ESS that prohibits us from having our own everyday pool of subs? That these folks would be employed by the school system as a substitute teacher. They would work 5 days a week, okay, for the school week.
Like they're full-time.
Like
And
a
then-
site-based or
I like
something.
And what could happen is, if you need on an average day 15 subs division-wise, I don't know what that is. Do you know, Shane?
How many per day do I
Yeah.
need Division One?
On the average.
Oh, I'd say probably 100 or more.
Okay, so if we hire 20, just pick a number, and employed them by the school system, and they're in the substitute pool. So you let ESS fill the positions, and its shortage of positions would come out of our pool, okay? That
Like a
way you.
hybrid kind of.
Yeah, otherwise it's a little bit of both. You'd have our pool of 20 or however many we would need. You're gonna pay for that anyway through ESS, so it should be a wash on a budget expense. And have, guarantee these folks, we'll make a commitment to you, every day these school is open, 177 days or something.
Right.
You have guaranteed employment. If you don't need them, and the building needs a little help with something else, and you can shift them around a little bit. Kind of like the old days with the government typing pool, so.
Right.
I was wondering the same thing, could we hire a full-time person, like an IA or something, who's like the Skyline High School sub? And then, obviously, they couldn't fill every assignment, but then like at least there's a starting point, or maybe it's two people. or-
So we did do something similar to that last year with some instructional positions that you as a board approved, and they were used with some federal funding that they could only sub. That's what their purpose was.
That was called the classroom support instructional assistant.
And all they
Is that
do,
successful?
and all they do is sub, and I think they both have, there's two.
Everyone at the elementary level has 2, except A.S. Rhodes has 1. And then.
We still have them this year?
I think
They
Warren
do have them
County,
this year.
Warren
And then
County High School does not have 2 of their instructional assistants positions filled.
Right.
So, that was part of some of those grants that we had, and it was geared towards just putting 2 permanent people in the building that were there for subs. And
So are these numbers above that? Like,
They are. Once that grant is gone, those positions would need to be filled as well. We also
Right,
work
but
with
we'd have to pay
ESS
for
for
them
building-based
one way or the other.
subs. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, we have to pay for them one way or the other, so it's not as though we'd have to find that money out of nowhere, like.
We also have building-based subs, and pretty much most of our schools have at least one of those, if not 2. And I actually have one school with 3, because that's how I can just ensure that it's a secondary school, one of our schools, just to make sure that every day they come in, those positions are filled, because they're that, essential. Those people
So-
are there every day like a
So
full-time
so in
employee.
some schools, we would have 5 people,
Yeah.
if we have the 2 instructional assistants plus the 3 building-based subs, then that school automatically has 5 people there to cover classes, and then they may have a need on top of that, because that's just not enough to get that.
I mean, do we
And
need
who-
more? I mean, this looks like a lot, like 400 people out at, Resi in 3 months? Like, do we need more of those positions?
More of those building-based positions? Probably. I just don't know that we could, I can assign those, but are they available, would be the question. Can we fill those?
Building-based sub positions open to, like, part-time, so we could appeal to college students who might have Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, but they want to sub on, they'll commit to Tuesday, Thursdays.
They just ask, I know with, one of the things with ESS that we really work hard to do, from a system standpoint that they have in place, it's not me, it's the system they have, is at least 4 times a month can you serve. So if you could go every Friday or just once a week or 4 days in a row, you're gonna meet that minimum, so.
I'm talking about
I mean, like
hiring
every
through
Tuesday
us,
and
not
Thursday.
through ESS, because the appeal of the ESS and of subbing is that, like, I know I have friends who are stay-at-home moms, and they'll pick up little shifts here and there
Right.
as needed. But if we're talking about, like, Warren County Public Schools hires them, can we hire them on a part-time basis of what works with their schedule? Like, maybe they're a
It's not like we
preschool
might call you
teacher
or
elsewhere.
not on Tuesday, it's like you're working every Tuesday.
Right, right.
When the contract was negotiated originally, and as it stands today, we hire teachers that are substitute positions through ESS, clerical positions and administrative front office positions for schools, and instructional assistants, other than the ones we have ourselves. So there is no board-established rate or position for what you're talking about. So we would have to work on that together as a team to establish that process and that rate, and then pull that position, if it is included in that number now, back into the division, which is a little bit like Mr. Rinaldi's talking about, kind of a hybrid almost of, these are ours, we'll fill with this when these are open. And that's another option that you could have with ESS, to renegotiate that contract process. And I think the last time I came before you, that requires, I think, any change like that, just requires us to submit it to them. If we want to do something different, it's 30 days for us to make them aware of a change that we want to have. They have a legal team, I'm sure, that will review the contracts as they get changed, just like we would have our attorney look that over, and then make sure that it fits within the boundaries of our policy. And the company would do the same for them, and then reintegrate. Another thing to make you aware of is the minimum wage is going up again in January. So next month, I'm going to have to ask you to go up another $1 on any rate that's 11 to 12. And so that's going to push some of our cost up again in ESS, because some of those folks, depending on their rate, you have to make sure they continue to grow. I like to kind of get ahead of that. I don't want to just be a minimum wage employer.
Well, so it could be ahead of that, because ESS takes their 30%, so it's that minimum wage plus the ESS 30%. So we could, on the subs that we hire, pay them more, and pay them 15% more and save 15%.
Well,
And I'm just throwing numbers out,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Well, the only thing I'm cautioned, the larger we grow this, so if we're talking about doing our own, there has to be that management piece within that. And then you roll into, when we hire somebody, we have the district cost, which is around 20. What is our total cost, Rob, off the top of your head for an employee?
These wouldn't be covered via, well, some could be covered VRS positions, but if it's just a substitute, then the employer cost really is just a 7.65.
So there's that 7.6, almost 8%. So there's still, and then, you have some other costs that could be in there as well. But really, my thought is that, if the board wants, we could go out for a request for proposal, because as Mr. Goodwin has said, we have ESS we're currently with. There's been another company contact him, see if there's anything out there, look through that. But at the same time, I've requested for Mr. Goodwin, as he stated, to go look at these other schools and evaluate their programs to see what it would take for us to do our own. And then bring that information back to you in January at the work session to look over, discuss, and then for you guys to tell us which way you want us to go. And then that way we start building that into our budget.
Yeah, I think that's an organized way to look at the whole issue and, just find out what everybody else is doing. Can that be adjusted for us along with our own staff, whatever makes sense.
So that would be, I was gonna say, to answer your question, I think what I would like to see is exactly what you just said. Look at what ESS is currently doing, have you go out and talk to, as many as you can, that's a lot. Look at what it would take for us to, do that in-house, because I know we've talked about too, you're only one person. I think it's very feasible that we need to grow your HR staff a little bit too, and we need to put that assistance there, so, I completely know all the multitude of things you're doing, and you're still one person, and I appreciate it all. So I think that's very reasonable to, put that in that, like, for us to do it, this is what it's gonna take, and then look at, that other option too, so that we can have everything. I think that would be a great direction to go into. And look at all
make the
the
best
options.
choice, yeah.
Yeah, so we're looking at everything.
So is that sound like an RFP then?
Yes, so I
Okay.
think we would do an RFP and
Okay.
And also talk to
And then local.
then local.
So RFP, compare that to local, so we really can get some factual data and numbers. We all want, obviously, to provide the same thing, which is a quality person in front of every one of our students and pay them the absolute best wage that we can, so that they stay with us and enjoy their work and, well taken care of. So I appreciate the opportunity to receive the feedback, and I look forward to providing that with you hopefully in January. But we'll provide you an update if it's a delay, but thank you. Any other questions that you have for me that I can answer?
Appreciate it,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, that ends our work session items for this evening. Can I get somebody to read us into executive session, please?
This motion is made that this open public meeting of the Warren County School Board become a closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711. The school board desires to discuss the following matter in a closed meeting. Section 2.2-3711A1. Discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of employees of the school board, specifically an employee personnel issue. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Grant, can you do roll call, please?
Sure. Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mrs. Salins?
Aye.
Dr. Funk?
Aye.
Mr. Rinaldi?
Aye.
Dr. Pence?
Aye. Okay, thank you.